I need to get this off my chest before it's too late. Maybe someone can make sense of what I've experienced, or at least know what happened to me if I never post again. 3 weeks ago, I took a job as a fire lookout in the Black Ridge National Forest. I was desperate for money and desperate to get away. My life had gone to shit after my divorce. Julie took the house, the car, and the dog. All I had left was a mountain of debt and a drinking problem. When I saw the advertisement for a seasonal fire lookout position, it seemed like the perfect escape. 3 months in the wilderness, away from people, away from reminders of my failed marriage, away from the liquor stores that had become my second home. The job interview was conducted over a scratchy phone line. The voice on the other end sounded ancient, like dried leaves rustling in the wind. "Mr. Reynolds, are you aware this position requires complete isolation for extended periods?" "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I replied. Good. The tower has basic amenities: electricity, a small kitchen, a cot, and a radio for communication. Your duty is to scan the horizon for signs of fire and report immediately. Simple enough. I should have paid more attention when his tone shifted. "Now, Mr. Reynolds, there are specific protocols you must follow. Black Ridge has peculiarities. I'm sending you a manual. Read it carefully. Follow the rules. Do you understand?" "Of course," I said, barely listening, already imagining myself free from the suffocating weight of my current life. The manual arrived the next day, a weathered leather-bound notebook. Inside, carefully handwritten instructions filled the pages. I skimmed through it, noting odd entries about times to avoid looking through the binoculars, specific radio frequencies to never tune into, and strange rituals involving the lantern at midnight. I dismissed it as hazing for the new guy, or maybe the eccentricities of an organization with too much bureaucracy. How fucking wrong I was. They drove me up part of the way, then I hiked the remaining 5 miles to Tower 19. It was beautiful, standing 80 feet tall, overlooking endless miles of pine forests, mountains carving the horizon into jagged teeth against the sky. Inside, everything was exactly as described. Modest but functional kitchen, small bathroom with a shower that worked half the time, a cot that had seen better days, a desk with a logbook, and the crown jewel, a 360-degree observation deck with high-powered binoculars. "Remember the rules," the ranger said before leaving. His eyes betrayed something I couldn't place at the time. Fear, pity. Some of them might seem strange, but they're there for a reason. I nodded and watched him drive away, feeling a strange mix of freedom and unease. That night, as I was unpacking, I found the manual tucked into my backpack with a note taped to it. "Your life depends on this." Such dramatic flair, I thought. If only I'd known. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. The first few days were peaceful, scanning the horizon for smoke, logging weather patterns, monitoring wildlife movement. It was therapeutic, the monotony allowing my mind to gradually quiet. I was even following some of the rules out of boredom more than belief. Then, on day 6, I broke rule number 1. Never look at Tower 14 through the binoculars between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. That's when everything changed. I didn't even realize what I was doing. It was 3:30 p.m., and I was doing my routine scan of the horizon. Tower 14 was visible in the distance, about 12 miles southwest as the crow flies. Nothing special about it, just another fire lookout tower like mine. I swung the binoculars in that direction, adjusting the focus. At first, everything seemed normal. The metal structure gleamed in the afternoon sun, windows reflecting light. Then I noticed something odd. There was no movement. Fire lookouts usually step outside onto the catwalk regularly to get a better view, but Tower 14 was perfectly still. As I focused more intently, the air around the tower seemed to ripple, like heat waves, but more pronounced, more deliberate. The tower itself began to warp in my vision, stretching and compressing as if it were made of putty rather than steel and wood. And then I saw it, a figure standing on the observation deck. It wasn't human. The proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head too large and misshapen. It stood perfectly still, facing my direction. Despite the distance, I felt with absolute certainty that it was looking directly at me. I jerked away from the binoculars, my heart hammering in my chest. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. I took several deep breaths, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Heat distortion, exhaustion, my eyes playing tricks after hours of staring at the monotonous landscape. I checked my watch, 3:36 p.m. With trembling hands, I reached for the manual and flipped through it. Rule number 1. Never look at Tower 14 through the binoculars between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. Below it, in smaller writing, if this rule is broken, follow these steps immediately. Close all windows and lock the door. Light the red candle in the supply drawer. Do not use the radio until sunset. Do not look outside again until the sun has fully set. At exactly 8:17 p.m., say the following into the sink drain. I witnessed without permission. I apologize for my transgression. I seek no knowledge beyond my purpose. I stared at the instructions, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. This had to be a joke, some kind of hazing ritual for newcomers. But the memory of that figure, its impossible proportions, the way it seemed to be staring directly at me. The laughter died in my throat. With shaking hands, I closed the windows and locked the door. I found the red candle in the supply drawer exactly where the manual said it would be. As I lit it, the flame burned an unusual crimson, casting bloody light across the tower's interior. I sat on my cot, staring at the candle, refusing to look outside. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was absurd. But something deeper, more primal, urged me to follow the rules to the letter. At 8:17 p.m. precisely, I crouched over the sink, feeling like a complete idiot, and whispered the words into the drain. The moment I finished, the candle flame flared brilliantly, then extinguished itself, leaving a trail of peculiarly sweet-smelling smoke. I slept fitfully that night, dreaming of distorted towers and elongated limbs. When morning came, I almost convinced myself it had all been a stress-induced hallucination, until I noticed the message written in the condensation on the bathroom mirror. 1 transgression forgiven, 3 remain. I frantically wiped the mirror clean, my breathing shallow and quick. How had someone gotten into the tower while I slept? The door was still locked, the windows still shut. No one could have written that message, unless they'd been here all along. The radio crackled to life, making me jump. Tower 19, this is base. Do you copy? Over. I hesitated before picking up the receiver. Tower 19 here. I copy. Over. Just checking in. Everything normal up there? I glanced at the mirror, now clear of any message. Yeah, I lied. Everything's fine. Good to hear. By the way, did you notice anything unusual yesterday afternoon? Around 3:30? No, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing unusual. Why? A pause. Too long. No reason, just routine questioning. Remember to check in at the usual times. Base out. The radio went silent. I sat there, holding the receiver, my knuckles white. I opened the manual again, this time reading it thoroughly. There were 27 rules in total. Some seemed mundane. Always keep the north-facing window clean, while others were deeply unsettling. If you hear your name called 3 times in succession at night, do not respond, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. With growing unease, I read rule number 5. Never mention any unusual occurrences over the radio unless explicitly asked 3 times. They had only asked me once. I jumped at a soft tapping sound. Something was gently rapping against the window. With dread pooling in my stomach, I turned to look. A large raven perched on the windowsill, its feathers unnaturally glossy, almost wet-looking. Its eyes were fixed on me with an intelligence that felt impossible. In its beak was a small, folded piece of paper. Rule number 13. If a raven brings a message, accept it. Never read it after sunset. I opened the window just enough to take the paper from the bird's beak. It didn't fly away immediately, but continued to stare at me for several long seconds before spreading its wings and departing. I unfolded the note with trembling fingers. You are being watched from Tower 14. They know your name now. Be careful, James Reynolds. I hadn't told anyone my full name since arriving, not even during the radio check-ins. Something was very wrong at Black Ridge National Forest, and somehow I knew it was centered around Tower 19, my tower, and whatever lurked near it. The next 3 days passed in a fog of paranoia and strict rule following. I kept the manual with me at all times, reading and rereading the rules until they were seared into my brain. I couldn't afford another transgression, not when I only had 3 left. My routine became dictated by the bizarre instructions. Every morning at 6:43 a.m., I had to place a small offering of my breakfast on the eastern windowsill. Rule number 7. A portion of your first meal must be shared with the forest. I'd watch as birds or sometimes small rodents would come to take the food. Once, nothing came, and the food remained untouched until sunset when it simply vanished while I was in the bathroom. At noon precisely, I had to wind the old brass compass that I found in the desk drawer, turning it exactly 7 times clockwise. Rule number 10. The compass must be wound at midday, never more than 7 turns, never fewer. The compass didn't seem to point north, or any consistent direction for that matter. Its needle swung lazily, sometimes settling on a direction, sometimes spinning continuously. I noticed that on days when it spun without stopping, the radio would emit a soft static even when turned off. The hardest rule to follow was number 19. 1 hour before sunset, count the number of visible clouds. If the count is odd, close your eyes for exactly 10 minutes. If even, remain perfectly still for the same duration. It was difficult to count clouds with precision, and I lived in terror of miscounting and breaking another rule. I'd ended up counting 3 times, always going with the majority result. Today marked my 9th day at Tower 19. The incident with Tower 14 had left me shaken, but nothing as dramatic had happened since. I'd almost convinced myself that if I just followed the rules, I might make it through my 3-month contract. I was wrong. At 2:15 p.m., I was making a sandwich when the radio sprang to life. Tower 19, Tower 19, come in. The voice wasn't the usual base operator. It sounded younger, female. I approached cautiously, remembering rule number 22. If contacted on the radio outside of scheduled times, verify the caller's identity before responding. This is Tower 19, I said. Please identify yourself. Oh, thank God, the voice replied, relief evident. This is Emma Carson, Tower 16. I've been trying to reach anyone for hours. I frowned. Tower 16 was northeast of my position, about 15 miles as the crow flies. According to my orientation, it was currently manned by a veteran lookout named Gerald. "Where's Gerald?" I asked. A pause. "I don't know any Gerald. I've been stationed here for 3 weeks. Listen, I need to report something strange. I've been seeing smoke near your location, but it's not like normal smoke. It's moving against the wind, and sometimes it seems to form shapes." I stepped onto the catwalk, scanning the surroundings. The day was clear, no sign of smoke anywhere. "I don't see any smoke," I said, returning to the radio. "It comes and goes," Emma said. "But that's not all. Last night, I heard screaming coming from the direction of Tower 19. It sounded like..." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It sounded like someone being murdered." I'd slept through the night without incident. "Emma, I think you're mistaken. There was no screaming here." "I know what I heard," she insisted. "And there's something else. Have you noticed anything strange about Tower 14? No one answers when I radio them." My pulse quickened. "When did you try contacting them?" "Yesterday, around 3:30 p.m. The exact time I was forbidden to look at Tower 14. I flipped through the manual frantically, looking for any rule about discussing Tower 14 over the radio. There wasn't one specifically, but rule number 23 caught my eye. If another lookout reports smoke that you cannot verify, or sounds that you did not hear, terminate radio contact immediately and reset the radio to frequency 7.3. Do not use the radio again for 3 hours. "Emma, I need to go," I said abruptly. "Wait! There's something important I need to tell." I switched the radio to frequency 7.3 as instructed. Immediately, a low humming filled the tower, emanating not from the radio, but seemingly from the walls themselves. It lasted for exactly 30 seconds before stopping. I stepped back from the radio, my heart pounding. Was Emma real? Or was this some kind of test? I checked the logbook for information about Tower 16's current occupant, but the relevant page had been torn out. Someone didn't want me to know who was really at Tower 16. As I was contemplating this, movement outside caught my eye. I looked up to see a deer at the base of my tower. Not unusual in itself. Wildlife was common here. But this deer was standing on its hind legs, its front hooves pressed against the tower's base, neck craned upward as if trying to look at me. Its eyes reflected the afternoon sunlight with an unnatural golden glow. Rule number 15. If wildlife behaves unusually, record it in the logbook, but do not acknowledge the behavior directly. Continue your duties as normal. With shaking hands, I wrote in the logbook, 3:17 p.m., deer observed at base of tower. I made no mention of its bizarre posture or unsettling gaze. The deer remained in that position for precisely 7 minutes before dropping back to all fours and wandering into the forest. The moment it disappeared among the trees, the temperature in the tower dropped by at least 15 degrees. My breath misted in front of me. Rule number 8. Sudden temperature changes indicate a thinning barrier. Light the blue candle and recite the incantation on page 43. I found the blue candle in the same drawer as the red one and lit it with fumbling fingers. The flame burned with a deep azure glow. Turning to page 43, I found a paragraph written in what looked like Latin. I did my best to pronounce the words, having no idea what they meant. As I spoke the final syllable, the candle flame shot upward nearly a foot before returning to normal, and the temperature gradually returned to its previous level. What the hell was happening here? What barrier was thinning? The rules protected me, clearly, but from what? As evening approached, I followed rule number 19, counting clouds, 7, an odd number, and closing my eyes for 10 minutes. When I opened them, I nearly screamed. Written on the window in front of me, in what looked like condensation but couldn't have been given the warm temperature outside, were the words, "Emma is not at Tower 16. Emma was never at Tower 16. The writing faded even as I stared at it, evaporating into nothing within seconds. I spent the rest of the evening jumping at every sound, scrutinizing the manual for any rule I might have missed. Around 9 p.m., I decided to try to get some sleep, hoping things would seem more rational in the morning. Just as I was drifting off, the radio crackled again. "James." A raspy whisper, barely audible. "James Reynolds." I sat bolt upright. Rule number 5 flashed in my mind. If you hear your name called 3 times in succession at night, do not respond, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. I held my breath, waiting. "James." The voice was clearer now, and with a jolt of recognition, I realized it sounded exactly like Julie, my ex-wife. "James." That was twice. One more, and the rule would apply. I stared at the radio, mesmerized and terrified. "Help me, James." The voice changed, becoming desperate, pained. "They've got me. They're taking me to Tower 14. Please, James." It wasn't 3 times in succession. The rule didn't apply. But everything in me screamed that responding would be a terrible mistake. "Julie," I whispered, not into the radio but to myself. "That's not possible." The radio hissed with static. Then, "Of course it's possible, James. I've been trying to find you. I made a mistake. I want you back." "I'm in the forest, James. I came to surprise you, but I got lost. And now something's following me." I reached for the manual, my hands trembling so badly I could barely turn the pages. There had to be a rule for this situation. Rule number 24. If the radio speaks personal truths that no one else could know, disconnect the power immediately and recite the Lord's Prayer backward. I hesitated. Julie had said she wanted me back, that she'd made a mistake. But that wasn't a personal truth no one else could know. That was just what I wanted to hear. "Remember when you proposed, James?" The radio continued. "On the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier? You dropped the ring and we had to bribe the operator to stop so we could look for it." My blood turned to ice. That was true. We'd found the ring wedged in the seat mechanism. No one else had been there. No one else knew that story. I lunged for the power cord and yanked it from the wall. The radio went silent. With a shuddering breath, I began to recite the Lord's Prayer backward, stumbling over the unfamiliar order of words. When I finished, I was drenched in sweat, my throat raw. For several minutes, I sat in complete silence, the darkness of the tower broken only by moonlight streaming through the windows. Then, from the direction of Tower 14, a column of what looked like smoke began to rise. But as Emma had described, it moved against the wind, and it wasn't dispersing like normal smoke. It was coalescing, forming a shape, the shape of a woman. I scrambled for the manual, my fingers frantically turning pages. Rule number 17. If smoke moves unnaturally after sunset, it is not smoke. Do not look at it directly. Draw the symbols from page 62 on all windows, with the salt provided. I found the salt shaker in the kitchen cabinet, and referencing the strange symbols on page 62, began drawing them on each window with my finger dipped in salt. As I completed the final symbol, a fierce wind suddenly battered the tower, making the whole structure creak and sway. Outside, the smoke woman dissipated, torn apart by the gale. I collapsed onto my cot, exhausted and terrified. What fresh hell had I walked into? These weren't just rules. They were protections against something malevolent. As if in answer to my unspoken question, my eyes fell on a paragraph at the very end of the manual, one I hadn't noticed before. The barriers between worlds are weakest at Tower 19. What lies beyond seeks entry. The rules keep it at bay. Break them at your peril. Remember, it knows what you desire. It knows what you fear. It will use both against you. 3 transgressions remain before the barrier fails. I had only been here 9 days. I had 81 more to go, and something wanted very badly for me to break the rules. I woke to the sound of knocking, not the usual settling of the tower or branches against the windows, but deliberate rhythmic knocking. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 quick taps, over and over. The room was still dark. My watch read 3:17 a.m. The knocking wasn't coming from the door or windows. It was coming from the trapdoor that led to the maintenance space beneath the floor. I fumbled for the manual, heart racing. The pages stuck together with my sweat as I flipped through them frantically. Where was it? I knew I'd seen something about knocking. Rule number 11. If you hear knocking from places where no one could be, count the number of knocks in each sequence. Even numbers are harmless. Odd numbers require immediate action. 3 knocks, an odd number. The instructions continued. For odd-numbered knocks, light a white candle and place it on the source of the sound. Do not speak until the knocking stops. If a voice responds to the candle, extinguish it immediately and burn sage in every corner of the tower. I found the white candle with trembling hands and lit it. The trapdoor continued its rhythmic knocking as I approached. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. I set the candle on top of the trapdoor, watching as wax dripped onto the weathered wood. The knocking stopped immediately. The sudden silence was almost more terrifying than the sound had been. I stood frozen, scarcely breathing, waiting. 1 minute passed. 2. 5. Just as I began to relax, thinking the danger had passed, a voice spoke from beneath the trapdoor. It was soft, childlike, but with an unnatural hollow quality that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Please let me in. I'm cold. I'm scared. Without hesitation, I blew out the candle. The manual didn't say I could speak yet, so I remained silent as I searched for the sage bundle I'd seen in the supplies. I found it and, using my lighter, set it smoldering. The pungent smoke filled the tower as I moved to each corner, waving the sage bundle as instructed. "You're being very rude," the childlike voice said, no longer soft but harsh and grating. The trapdoor shuddered, as if something were pressing against it from below. "I know you're alone up here. I know you're afraid. I could keep you company." I continued the sage ritual, moving to the final corner. As I waved the smoking bundle, the voice from beneath the trapdoor changed again, becoming a deep, wet growl. "When I get in, I will wear your skin." The trapdoor slammed upward violently, but only for an instant before slamming back down. Something had tried to force its way through but couldn't. The rules had protected me. I spent the rest of the night sitting against the far wall, the manual clutched to my chest, staring at the trapdoor until dawn's light finally filtered through the windows. After sunrise, I cautiously approached the trapdoor and, using a broomstick, pushed it open. There was nothing below but the expected maintenance space, dusty, cobweb-filled, and completely empty. No sign of whatever had knocked or spoken. But on the underside of the trapdoor itself, burned into the wood as if by a hot brand, was a handprint. Too large to be human, with fingers that were unnaturally long and jointed. I let the trapdoor fall shut and placed the heaviest things I could find on top of it. My backpack, a box of supplies, the metal toolbox. It was a futile gesture if whatever had nearly broken through decided to try again, but it made me feel marginally better. At 9:30 a.m., the radio crackled to life for the scheduled check-in. "Tower 19, this is base. Daily check-in. Do you copy?" I picked up the receiver, hesitating before responding. Tower 19 here. I copy. Any incidents to report? The operator's voice was professional, neutral. I thought about the knocking, the voice, the burned handprint. Rule number 5. Never mention any unusual occurrences over the radio unless explicitly asked 3 times. No incidents, I lied. All quiet here. Weather conditions? Clear skies, light wind from the northeast, temperature around 70 degrees. Very good. Base out. As the radio went silent, I noticed something odd. During previous check-ins, the operator had always ended with, "Stay safe." Today, they hadn't. It was a small deviation, but in my heightened state of paranoia, it felt significant. I checked the manual again. Rule number 25. If base deviates from standard communication protocols, they may have been compromised. For the next 24 hours, maintain radio silence and perform the purification ritual on page 78 before every meal. With growing unease, I turned to page 78. The purification ritual was simple but bizarre. I had to draw a circle of salt around my plate, recite a short incantation, and place 3 drops of my own blood into my drink. The blood part wasn't explicitly stated, but the instruction to add 3 drops of essence to your beverage, accompanied by an illustration of a pricked finger, made it clear enough. Great. Now I had to bleed into my coffee. This job was getting better by the minute. As I prepared my lunch, a sad sandwich of slightly stale bread and canned tuna, I followed the ritual precisely. The incantation was in that same strange language I'd encountered before, and I did my best to pronounce the alien syllables. After adding 3 drops of blood to my water, pricking my finger with a safety pin, I noticed the liquid briefly swirled with red tendrils before becoming clear again. I ate my lunch hesitantly, half expecting to keel over poisoned, but nothing happened. At least, nothing immediately noticeable. The afternoon passed with me performing my actual job duties, scanning the horizon for smoke, recording weather conditions, maintaining the logbook. The mundane tasks helped ground me somewhat, though I remained hypervigilant, constantly referencing the manual and checking the time to ensure I didn't miss any time-specific rules. At 4:51 p.m., I was on the catwalk doing my afternoon scan when I noticed something strange happening at the base of my tower. The ground was moving. At first, I thought it was another animal, perhaps a coyote or fox, but as I looked more carefully, I realized the earth itself was shifting, as if something large was tunneling just beneath the surface. The movement circled the tower once, twice, 3 times, before stopping directly below the north side. The ground bulged upward slightly, then settled. I flipped through the manual with mounting dread. No specific rule about the ground moving. The closest was rule number 20. If the natural world behaves unnaturally, record it precisely in the logbook and avoid direct contact with the affected area for 24 hours. I dutifully recorded the incident in the logbook, making sure to note the exact time and location. As I was writing, I heard a soft scraping sound from the exterior wall of the tower, as if something was climbing up. I froze, pen still pressed to paper, listening. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. Something was definitely moving up the wooden siding of the tower. I moved silently to the window nearest the sound, staying to the side to avoid being seen. At first, I saw nothing. Then a hand appeared at the windowsill, human-looking but wrong, the skin a pallid gray-white, the fingers too long and bent at unnatural angles. The hand gripped the sill, its long nails digging into the wood. I stumbled back, clapping a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Rule number 9. If something tries to enter the tower, remain absolutely silent and still until it leaves. Do not look directly at it. I pressed myself against the far wall, eyes fixed on the floor, listening as the thing outside the window continued its efforts to find a way in. The hand disappeared from the sill, and I heard the scraping continue along the wall toward the next window. For over an hour, I remained motionless, barely breathing, as the entity circled the tower, testing each window and the door. Finally, as the sun began to set, the sounds stopped. Still, I didn't move for another 30 minutes, terrified that it might be a trick. When I finally dared to look outside, there was nothing there. But on every windowsill and the door frame were deep scratch marks that hadn't been there before. That night, I deliberately broke my own rule and pulled the cot into the center of the main room, away from the walls and especially the trapdoor. I surrounded myself with a circle of salt, placed a lit red candle at each cardinal direction, and kept the manual and a container of salt within arm's reach. Despite my exhaustion, I fought to stay awake, terrified of what might happen if I slept. But eventually, my body betrayed me, and I drifted off. I dreamed of Julie. We were back in our apartment, and everything was normal. She was making coffee in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. I approached from behind and wrapped my arms around her waist, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I've missed you," I said. She turned in my arms, smiling. "I've missed you too. Why did you leave me, James?" "I didn't leave you," I protested. "You left me. You took everything." Her smile remained, but her eyes grew sad. "Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm the villain in your story?" The kitchen began to blur around us, the walls bending and warping. Julie's face remained in perfect focus. "You never told me why you got fired," she said. "Why you started drinking. Why you grew so distant. You just let me believe it was all my fault." The walls were melting now, running like wax. Behind them was forest, dark and dense. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I meant it. "I was ashamed. I couldn't face you." Julie stroked my cheek. Her hand felt wrong, the fingers too long, the joints too flexible. "You still haven't faced yourself, James. That's why you're here, isn't it? Running away again." Her face began to change, subtle at first. Her eyes growing just slightly too large, her smile widening beyond what should have been possible. "But you can't run from what lives in Tower 14, she said, her voice distorting. "You can't run from what's coming for Tower 19. I tried to pull away, but her arms, now impossibly long and wrong, held me tight. "What is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What's in Tower 14? What's coming for me?" Her face was barely recognizable now, features shifting and realigning into something inhuman. Only her eyes remained the same. Julie's eyes, sad and knowing. "The rules are breaking down, James," she said, her voice a chorus of discordant whispers. "2 more transgressions, and the barrier falls. When it does, they will all come through. Tower 19 is the door, and you are the key." I woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright. The salt circle around my cot was broken. A gap about 6 inches wide had appeared, the salt scattered as if swept aside by something. The candles had burned out. Morning light streamed through the windows, and on the wall, written in what looked like ash, were the words, "2 transgressions remain. Tower 14 is waiting." I scrambled to my feet, searching the tower frantically. Nothing seemed disturbed except for the salt circle. No sign of an intruder. But as I moved toward the sink to wash my face, I noticed something unsettling. In the mirror, my reflection looked wrong. My eyes were slightly too large, my smile too wide when I wasn't smiling at all. I blinked, and the image corrected itself, becoming my normal reflection. I was losing my mind. That had to be it. Isolation and fear were making me hallucinate. But the scratches on the windowsills were real. The handprint on the trapdoor was real. The broken salt circle was real. And the rules kept working. They kept me safe. I had to focus on following them perfectly. No more transgressions. No more mistakes. 78 more days until my contract ended. I could make it. As I flipped through the manual to check the morning rules, a small note fell out. A scrap of paper I hadn't seen before. On it, in handwriting different from the rest of the manual, was a single sentence. The previous watchman broke all 4 rules. That's why there's something near Tower 19 now. The note about the previous watchman haunted me. I searched the tower for any information about who had come before me, but found nothing. No personal items left behind, no initials carved into the desk, not even a name in the logbook's front page where it should have been recorded. It was as if the previous occupant had been deliberately erased. As I prepared my breakfast, instant oatmeal with the last of my fresh blueberries, I performed the purification ritual meticulously. The blood from my fingertips swirled in my coffee before disappearing, just like yesterday. I was getting used to the metallic tang it added to my drink, which disturbed me more than the act itself. At 6:43 a.m., I placed a portion of oatmeal on the eastern windowsill as required. I watched from inside as a raven, possibly the same one that had delivered the message days ago, landed and pecked at the offering. It looked up at me with those unnaturally intelligent eyes, cocked its head, and then flew off without eating anything. Something cold settled in my stomach. I checked the manual. Rule number 7, addendum. If the offering is refused, danger is imminent. Remain indoors until noon and scatter salt across all thresholds. I spent the morning pacing, jumping at every creak and groan of the tower. At precisely noon, I performed the compass winding ritual, rule number 10, noting with unease that the needle spun continuously without settling on a direction. I remembered my earlier observation. On days when it spun without stopping, the radio emitted static even when turned off. Sure enough, as if on cue, the radio began to hiss softly, despite being unplugged since the Julie incident. The static rose and fell in a rhythm almost like breathing. As I scattered salt across the doorway and windowsills as instructed, I felt a strange resistance in the air, as if I were moving through water. The temperature fluctuated wildly, first uncomfortably hot, then cold enough to see my breath, then back to normal in the span of minutes. Rule number 8. Sudden temperature changes indicate a thinning barrier. Light the blue candle and recite the incantation on page 43. I lit the blue candle with shaking hands and recited the Latin-like incantation for the second time. The candle flame danced and wavered, but didn't shoot up as it had before. Instead, it bent at an impossible angle, as if responding to a wind that wasn't there, pointing directly at the trapdoor. Whatever had visited last night was still here, beneath the floor. The radio's static changed, forming patterns that almost sounded like words. I tried to ignore it, but found myself leaning closer, straining to understand. James, rules, Tower 14, coming. A sharp knock at the door made me jump back, heart pounding. 3 quick raps, just like the ones I'd heard on the trapdoor. I froze, remembering rule number 11 about odd-numbered knocks. I needed a white candle, but all of them were in the supply drawer, on the other side of the room, past the trapdoor. The knocking came again, more insistent. 3 raps. Taking a deep breath, I stepped carefully around the trapdoor, keeping as close to the wall as possible. I reached the supply drawer and extracted a white candle with trembling fingers. As I turned back, I saw the trap door quiver slightly, as if something beneath it was pressing upward. The knocking at the door continued, now accompanied by a soft scraping sound along the walls. They were trying to get in, from below, from outside. They were coordinating. I approached the door cautiously, white candle and lighter in hand. Just as I was about to place the candle against the door as instructed, I hesitated. Wait. Something wasn't right. I checked the manual again. Rule number 11 was about knocking from places where no one could be. But someone could legitimately be at the door. Another ranger, a hiker in trouble. The rule might not apply. But rule number 6 did. Before opening the door to anyone, verify their identity. Ask 3 questions only they would know the answer to. If they answer correctly but something seems wrong, perform the verification ritual on page 32. "Who's there?" I called, my voice surprisingly steady. "Forest Service," came the reply. A man's voice, professional and calm. "Routine inspection." Relief washed through me. This was normal. This was part of the job. Nothing supernatural about a Forest Service inspection. But doubt crept in. The radio operator, potentially compromised, hadn't mentioned any inspection during our last check-in. "What's your name and position?" I asked, following protocol. "Ranger Mike Hawkins, District Supervisor. I need to inspect the tower for our quarterly assessment. Please open the door." The name sounded legitimate, but I had no way to verify it. I needed to ask my 3 questions. What date was my orientation? A pause. "June 10th, said the voice. That was correct. I'd started orientation on June 10th, arriving at the tower 3 days later. "Who conducted my interview?" Another pause, slightly longer. "Regional Director Peterson conducted phone interviews for all seasonal positions." Also correct. My initial relief was growing. Final question. "What's the call sign for this tower?" "Tower 19, designation Black Ridge North Quadrant. Call sign Oscar Echo 3. I frowned. I didn't know my tower's call sign. It might be correct, but I had no way to verify. "Just a moment," I said, turning to page 32 for the verification ritual. The page contained instructions for a simple test. Draw a specific symbol on a piece of paper and slide it under the door. A legitimate Forest Service employee would recognize it as a standard fire tower security measure and draw the correct responding symbol. I quickly sketched the symbol, a triangle with a horizontal line through it, and slid it under the door. "What's this?" The voice sounded confused, then annoyed. "Look, I don't have time for games. Open the door immediately, or I'll report your non-compliance." A legitimate ranger would know the procedure. My heart began to race again. Whatever was outside, it wasn't Ranger Mike Hawkins. "I'm sorry, I can't open the door right now," I called out. "Please return tomorrow." Silence. Then slowly, a change came over the voice. It deepened, developed a wet, gurgling quality that raised the hairs on my arms. "Open the door, James Reynolds. We've been very patient. Open the door or we'll find another way in." I backed away, nearly stumbling over my own feet. This was what the rules had been protecting me from. This was what lived near Tower 19. The knocking resumed, no longer just 3 raps, but a continuous pounding that shook the entire door in its frame. The windows began to rattle as well, and the trapdoor jumped and bumped against the items I'd stacked on top of it. In a panic, I grabbed the manual and flipped through it frantically. There had to be a rule for this situation, for when they were attacking from all sides. Rule number 27. In case of direct assault on the tower, create a circle of protection. Mix salt, your blood, and ash from the fireplace. Draw the symbol from page 86 on the floor and stand within it. Do not leave the circle until the assault ends, no matter what you see or hear. I worked quickly, slicing my palm with a kitchen knife and mixing my blood with salt and fireplace ash in a bowl. The pounding and scratching intensified, the very tower seeming to groan under the assault. Using a spoon to drip the mixture onto the floor, I carefully drew the complex symbol from page 86, a circle containing a 5-pointed star, surrounded by strange glyphs and smaller interconnected circles. As I completed the final line, the assault on the tower abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was almost more terrifying than the noise had been. I stood within the circle, blood dripping from my palm, listening. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then, softly at first but growing louder, came the sound of weeping. A child crying, the sound coming from just outside the door. "Please," a small voice sobbed. "I'm hurt. I'm lost. Please help me." My heart clenched, but I remained in the circle. The rules had kept me alive so far. I couldn't break them now. "I can see you through the window," the child's voice said. "I know you're in there. Why won't you help me? It's getting dark. I'm scared of the dark." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the pitiful sounds. This wasn't a real child. It couldn't be. The voice changed, not gradually but instantly, becoming Julie's. "James? James, thank God. I've been searching everywhere for you. There's something in these woods, something terrible. Please let me in. I need you." The temptation to look, to respond, was almost overwhelming. But this time, I knew better. This thing, whatever it was, could mimic voices perfectly. First the forest ranger, now Julie, before that a child. It was using my desires, my fears, my guilt against me. "James, please," Julie's voice broke with emotion. "I still love you. I made a mistake. We can fix this." I remained silent, eyes shut, standing perfectly still in the circle. Minutes stretched into hours. The voices continued, cycling through different approaches, Julie begging, then angry, then terrified and screaming for help. The child crying, then accusing me of leaving it to die. The ranger threatening official consequences. My parents, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, expressing disappointment in me. Each voice knew things they shouldn't have known. Personal details and secrets that cut deep. The entities had access to my memories, my regrets, my deepest shames. Finally, as dawn approached, the voices fell silent. I opened my eyes to find the tower intact, but transformed. Every surface, walls, windows, furniture, was covered in scratches. Deep gouges in the wood formed patterns that hurt my eyes to look at directly, like some sort of twisted language I couldn't comprehend, but my brain still tried to process. The door and windows remained closed and unbroken. The salt lines were undisturbed. The rules had protected me again. Exhausted beyond measure, I sank to my knees, still within the circle. The cut on my palm had stopped bleeding, already forming a scab. I needed water, food, sleep, but I was afraid to leave the circle's protection. The manual had said to remain until the assault ended. Had it ended? Or were they just regrouping? As I debated this, the radio crackled to life. I tensed, expecting another deception, but the voice that came through was the standard base operator. "Tower 19, this is base. Emergency check-in. Please respond immediately." I hesitated, remembering rule number 25 about compromised communications. But this was an emergency check-in, not the standard protocol. Different rules might apply. I crawled to the edge of the circle, reaching out as far as I could without leaving it, just managing to snag the radio handset. The cord stretched as I pulled it back into the circle with me. "Tower 19 here," I said, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. "Thank God," the operator sounded genuinely relieved. We lost contact with Tower 14 last night. Complete radio silence. Protocol requires check-in with adjacent towers when that happens. Tower 14. The tower I wasn't supposed to look at between 3:27 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. The tower where I'd seen the inhuman figure. The tower that featured in my nightmare. What happened? I asked cautiously. Unclear. A ranger team is headed there now. Have you observed anything unusual in that direction? Smoke? Light signals? Anything? I thought about the unnatural smoke I'd seen forming a woman's shape. The scratches covering my tower. The night of terror I'd just endured. Rule number 5. Never mention any unusual occurrences over the radio unless explicitly asked 3 times. This was only the first time they'd asked. Nothing unusual to report, I lied. All right. Stay vigilant and report immediately if you notice anything. This is highly irregular. Tower 14 has never missed a check-in before. Understood, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. One more thing, the operator added. We're sending Ranger Hawkins to your location for a safety check. Expect him before noon. Ranger Mike Hawkins? Yes, District Supervisor. Standard procedure when a tower goes offline. It couldn't be a coincidence. Whatever had tried to enter my tower last night had used that exact name. Either it knew about a real Ranger Hawkins who would be coming today, or... Can you describe Ranger Hawkins? I asked, trying to sound casual. Why do you ask? The operator's tone had changed subtly, becoming more guarded. Just want to make sure I recognize him when he arrives, I said quickly. A pause. Tall, dark hair, usually wears the standard green Forest Service uniform. You'll know him by his ID badge. All personnel carry proper identification. Right, of course. Thank you. Base out. I placed the radio down, my mind racing. If a real Ranger Hawkins was coming, I needed to be prepared. But what if this was another trick? What if whatever had assaulted the tower had infiltrated base somehow? I checked the manual for any rule about official visitors. Rule number 26. If Forest Service personnel are expected, prepare the tower according to standard protocols, but keep protective measures in place. Verify identity through official channels and the method on page 32. Under no circumstances allow entry to anyone who fails verification, regardless of apparent authority. At least I had some guidance. I'd need to clean up the tower, hide the protective circle, put away the manual and candles, make it look normal for an inspection. But I'd keep salt in my pocket and be ready to enact protections if needed. As I finally stepped out of the circle, my legs nearly gave way beneath me. I'd been standing for hours, and my muscles screamed in protest. I limped to the sink for water, gulping it down gratefully. Then I set about restoring order to the tower. I couldn't do anything about the scratches on the walls and furniture. There were too many, and they were too deep. I'd have to claim animal damage or vandals if asked. I swept up the salt blood ash mixture, stored the candles, and tried to make the place look reasonably professional. Around 11:30 a.m., I heard a vehicle approaching. Through the binoculars, I spotted a Forest Service truck winding up the access road. It parked at the trailhead, and a tall figure in green emerged, beginning the hike up to the tower. I tensed, preparing myself. This would either be a legitimate safety check or another attempt by the entities to gain entry. Either way, I'd be ready. As the figure approached, I studied him carefully. He matched the description. Tall, dark-haired, standard uniform. Nothing obviously wrong or inhuman about him. But the thing last night had sounded perfectly human too, at first. He reached the tower and called up. Hello? Tower 19? Ranger Hawkins, District Supervisor? Coming, I called back, gathering my verification tools. The symbol to slide under the door, salt in my pocket, and a kitchen knife tucked into the back of my jeans. Just in case. I pressed my ear to the door. No weird breathing, no unnatural sounds. I need to see some identification, I said. Please hold your badge up to the window. I heard movement, and a moment later, a Forest Service badge appeared in the window beside the door. Mike Hawkins, District Supervisor. The photo matched the man outside, but I wasn't taking any chances. I slid the verification symbol under the door. "What's this?" he asked, but his tone was more curious than annoyed. "Standard verification procedure," I said, "according to the manual." "Ah, I see," he sounded unsurprised. "It's been a while since anyone's used this. Give me a second." A paper slid back under my door with the correct responding symbol drawn on it, a circle with a vertical line through it. My heart rate slowed slightly. This seemed legitimate, but I had one more test. "Before I open the door, I need to ask you 3 questions according to protocol." "Go ahead," he said amicably. I asked the same 3 questions as before. He answered the first 2 correctly, and for the third he said, "I don't think this tower has a specific call sign beyond its designation as Tower 19. If it does, it would be in your orientation materials." An honest answer, not the confident but wrong response the entity had given. I unlocked the door and opened it, still gripping the knife behind my back. Ranger Hawkins stepped in and immediately wrinkled his nose. "Smells like something died in here." "And what happened to your walls?" I tensed, but his reaction seemed genuinely human, surprised and concerned by the state of the tower. "I'm not sure," I said cautiously. "It happened last night. I think it might have been vandals." He ran his fingers over one of the deep gouges. "These are serious, and they're everywhere. This is deliberate damage to federal property." He turned to me, frowning. "Did you see who did this?" I shook my head. "I was asleep." A weak excuse, but better than the truth. He didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. Instead, he began a methodical inspection of the tower, checking systems and making notes on a clipboard. "We're here about Tower 14, he said as he worked. "No contact since yesterday. Very unusual. You're the closest tower, so I wanted to check if you've noticed anything." This was the second time I'd been asked. One more, and according to rule number 5, I could share what I'd seen. "Nothing specific," I hedged. "Have you been to Tower 14 yet?" He shook his head. "Another team is headed there now. Should be arriving about the same time I got here." Ranger Hawkins completed his inspection, making a final note. "Apart from the vandalism, everything seems operational, but I have to report this damage. It's extensive. They might send a team to investigate." More people coming to the tower was the last thing I needed. Is that really necessary? It doesn't affect my ability to do the job. He gave me an odd look. "This is serious damage, Mr. Reynolds, and frankly, your reaction to it is concerning. Most people would be more upset about something like this." I didn't know how to respond. I couldn't exactly tell him I'd spent the night being terrorized by interdimensional entities. "I'll be back tomorrow with some security cameras to install," he continued. "In the meantime, keep your door locked and report any suspicious activity immediately." I nodded, relieved that at least he was leaving. As he headed for the door, he paused and turned back. "One more thing. Have you noticed anything unusual about Tower 14? Lights? Movement? Anything at all?" That was the third ask. According to rule number 5, I could now share what I'd seen. "Actually, yes," I said. "A few days ago I saw something strange there through the binoculars, around 3:30 in the afternoon." Hawkins went very still. What exactly did you see? I described the warping effect around the tower and the inhuman figure I'd glimpsed. As I spoke, Hawkins's expression changed from professional interest to something close to fear. You said 3:30? He asked, his voice tight. Specifically at that time? I nodded. He seemed to make a decision. Mr. Reynolds, I need to use your radio to contact my team immediately. I gestured to the radio set. He picked up the handset and began speaking rapidly into it, using codes I didn't recognize. After a brief exchange, he set the radio down, his face grim. My team reached Tower 14, he said. It's empty, no sign of the watchman, but the tower itself. He hesitated. The tower itself has been altered. Altered? How? The interior is covered in the same kind of markings as your walls here, but more extensive, more complete. And there's a symbol burned into the floor, a large circle with strange writing, like my protective circle, but bigger. I need to go there immediately, Hawkins said. You should come with me. It's not safe for you to stay here alone. Leave the tower? Abandon the rules that had kept me alive? That seemed like the worst possible idea. I can't leave my post, I said firmly. It's against regulations. Hawkins looked at me with something like pity. There are things happening in these woods that go beyond your job description, Mr. Reynolds. Tower 14's watchman is missing. Your tower has been vandalized with the same markings. This is a pattern, and you could be next. All the more reason to follow protocols, I insisted. The rules in the manual had protected me so far. I wasn't about to abandon them. Hawkins sighed. At least let me station someone here with you. That won't be necessary. I'll be fine. He clearly didn't agree, but seemed to recognize he couldn't force me. I'll be back tomorrow with the security equipment. Keep your radio on. If anything at all, seems off, call immediately. I agreed, just to get him to leave. As he walked down the stairs, I heard him murmur into a handheld radio. He's like the others, already too far gone. We'll need to evacuate Tower 19 forcibly tomorrow. What did he mean, like the others? Had previous watchmen experienced the same things? Were the rules actually making me too far gone, rather than protecting me? As Ranger Hawkins's truck disappeared down the access road, I consulted the manual again. No specific rule about Forest Service personnel wanting to remove me from the tower. The closest was rule number 3. Never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise. But it was currently daytime. Still, all my instincts screamed that leaving would be a mistake. The rules had kept me alive this long. I had to trust them. But doubt had been planted. What if the manual itself was part of the problem? What if following the rules was exactly what the entities wanted? The radio crackled. Tower 19, come in. This is Ranger Hawkins. I picked up the receiver. Tower 19 here. We've reached Tower 14. You need to see this. Can you look at Tower 14 through your binoculars right now? I checked the time. 3:24 p.m., 3 minutes before the forbidden window. I can't do that, I said. Not right now. This is an official request, Mr. Reynolds. I need you to confirm what we're seeing. I hesitated. Breaking rule number 1 had started all of this. I couldn't do it again. I'm sorry, I'll check in a bit. Tower 19 out. I set down the receiver as Hawkins began to protest. The radio immediately came back to life. This is a direct order. Look at Tower 14 now. I turned the volume down, my hands shaking. This was a test. It had to be. The real Hawkins wouldn't know about the 3:27 p.m. rule. This was the entities trying to trick me into breaking another rule, another transgression that would weaken the barrier further. I sat down heavily on my cot, head in my hands. I was trapped in an impossible situation. If I followed the rules, Hawkins thought I was too far gone and planned to forcibly remove me tomorrow. If I broke the rules, I risked letting in whatever lurked beyond the barrier. The manual sat beside me, its weathered pages containing the rules that had guided me, protected me. I picked it up, running my fingers over the leather cover. Then, on an impulse, I turned it over. There, burned into the back cover in small script I hadn't noticed before, was a message. The rules are the chains. The transgressions are the key. Tower 19 is the door. What waits beyond has always been here. The cryptic message burned into the back of the manual haunted me as I paced the tower. What did it mean? Were the rules protecting me or binding me? Were the transgressions dangerous or necessary? And why me? Why Tower 19? Doubt gnawed at me like a physical presence. I'd been following the rules meticulously, treating them as my salvation. But what if they were a trap? What if the real danger came from obeying, not breaking them? I rummaged through the desk drawers, looking for any information left by previous watchmen. In the back of the bottom drawer, wedged beneath a stack of official Forest Service forms, I found something, a small notebook, its cover water-stained and warped. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. Opening it revealed cramped, frantic handwriting that filled the pages, sometimes overlapping itself in places, as if the writer had been in too much of a hurry to start a new line. June 17th, Day 5 at Tower 19. Found the manual today. Rules seem odd but harmless enough. Following them just to be safe. June 20th. Strange sounds at night. The rules are working. Whatever it is stays outside. June 24th. Broke rule number 16 by mistake. Saw something outside that couldn't possibly be there. Julie's car. She's been dead for 3 years. I froze. Julie. Just like my ex-wife. But this wasn't my handwriting, and my Julie was very much alive when I left. June 25th. Things getting worse. More activity, more sounds. The rules are harder to follow now, so many time-specific actions. June 27th. Second transgression today. Fell asleep during the 419 ritual. Woke to find the inside of the tower scratched up. Something got in while I slept. I can feel it watching me. June 30th. Can't tell what's real anymore. Tower 14 watching me. Always watching. Ranger came today. Says I need to leave. I can't leave. The rules say never leave after dark. It's always dark now. Always dark. July 3rd. The barrier is thinning. I can see them sometimes, in the corners of my vision. Long limbs. Too many joints. Faces that shift and change. They speak with familiar voices. They know things they shouldn't know. July 5th. 3 transgressions now. Only one left. They're getting stronger. Breaking through. Last night they nearly got in. The protective circle saved me, but it's weakening. The symbols don't work as well now. July 8th. I understand now. The rules don't keep them out. The rules keep us in. We're already on their side of the barrier. Tower 19 isn't just a door. It's a cage, and I'm the bait. The entries became increasingly disjointed after that, devolving into frantic ramblings about the space between worlds and the thin places in reality. The final entry sent ice through my veins. They're in the walls now, in the floor, in the ceiling, watching, waiting. I've decided. The only way out is through. The final transgression. Break the last chain. Open the door fully. Maybe then I'll understand. Maybe then I'll be free. If anyone finds this, know that Tower 19 is not what it seems. The rules are the chains, not the protection. 4 transgressions to freedom. I'll let you know what's on the other side. The entry ended there. No more pages, no resolution, No explanation of what happened to the writer. Just a promise to report from the other side that clearly had never been fulfilled. I set the notebook down, my hands shaking. The previous watchman had deliberately broken all 4 rules, believing it would free him. And now he was gone. Was that what happened to Tower 14's watchman as well? The radio crackled to life, startling me. Tower 19, this is base. Emergency alert. The team at Tower 14 has lost contact. Ranger Hawkins is not responding. All lookouts are ordered to maintain radio contact every hour on the hour. Do you copy? I picked up the receiver. Tower 19 copies. What happened at Tower 14? Unclear. Last communication indicated the discovery of anomalies in the structure, then nothing. A second team is being dispatched at first light tomorrow. Until then, all lookouts are to secure their positions and maintain hourly radio contact. Understood, I replied, a terrible suspicion forming in my mind. Has anyone heard from Ranger Hawkins at all? A pause. Negative. His last check-in was from your location approximately 3 hours ago. 3 hours ago. Right after he'd left my tower, headed for Tower 14. He'd never made it, or something had happened to him when he arrived. Tower 19, we show a Forest Service vehicle still at the Tower 14 access point. Can you verify visually? I tensed. They wanted me to look toward Tower 14 again. I checked my watch. 6:17 p.m. Well after the forbidden window of 3:27 to 3:42. It should be safe now. I'll check, I said. Moving to the binoculars, I swung them toward Tower 14. The metal structure gleamed in the evening sunlight, looking completely normal. At its base, I could just make out a green Forest Service truck. No movement, no signs of life. Confirmed, I reported. Vehicle is at the base of Tower 14, no visible activity. Copy that. Maintain hourly contact. Base out. I lowered the binoculars, a sense of dread settling over me. If the real Ranger Hawkins had reached Tower 14 and then disappeared, what had happened to him? And more importantly, what had been trying to trick me into looking at Tower 14 during the forbidden time window earlier? The sun was setting. I began preparing for night, running through the rules for dusk. Rule number 12. At sunset, light a yellow candle in each window and recite the evening protection verse from page 25. I paused, the matchbox in my hand. The notebook's warning echoed in my mind. The rules don't keep them out. The rules keep us in. What if every rule I followed further bound me to this place, to whatever lurked beyond the barrier? What if each ritual strengthened the chains rather than my protection? But the evidence of my own experiences suggested otherwise. When I'd followed the rules, I'd stayed safe. The one time I'd broken a rule, looking at Tower 14 during the forbidden time, the haunting had begun. I struck the match and lit the yellow candles, one for each window, reciting the evening protection verse as required. Better to follow the rules and stay alive than risk breaking them, based on the ramblings of a possibly insane previous watchman. As night fell completely, I settled on my cot within a freshly drawn protective circle, the manual and a flashlight close at hand. The hourly radio check-ins punctuated the darkness, each one a brief connection to the outside world that did little to dispel the growing sense of isolation. At the 11 p.m. check-in, the base operator sounded tense. Tower 19. We've lost contact with Towers 11 and 23 now as well. Evacuation procedures are being initiated for all lookouts in your sector. A helicopter will be dispatched to your location at first light. Pack only essential items. Do you copy? I copy, I replied. Evacuation meant leaving the tower. Breaking rule number 3. Never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise. But the evacuation wouldn't happen until dawn, after sunrise. I'd still be following the rules. Be ready on the observation deck at 5:45 a.m. Bring no more than one backpack. Tower 19, acknowledge these instructions. Acknowledged. Ready at 5:45 a.m. Good. And Tower 19, stay safe tonight. Base out. The radio fell silent, leaving me with the distinct impression that the operator had wanted to say more, but couldn't or wouldn't over the airwaves. Stay safe tonight. As if they knew what might be coming for me. Around midnight, the temperature in the tower plummeted suddenly. Frost formed on the insides of the windows, despite the summer warmth outside. The yellow candles in the windows flickered wildly, then extinguished themselves simultaneously. Rule number 8. Sudden temperature changes indicate a thinning barrier. Light the blue candle and recite the incantation on page 43. I found the blue candle, now just a stub after multiple uses, and lit it with fingers numbed by the cold. As I began the Latin incantation, the candle's flame turned an unnatural purple, casting eerie light across the frost-covered surfaces of the tower. When I finished the final words, instead of the temperature returning to normal as it had before, the frost on the windows began to change. Patterns formed in the ice, not random crystalline structures, but deliberate shapes that resolved into crude writing. They are not coming for you. They are coming for us. The door must open, the final transgression. My breath caught in my throat. The entities were communicating directly now, no longer relying on mimicked voices or deception. They wanted me to break the final rule, to complete the 4 transgressions that would fully open whatever barrier the previous watchman had written about. "Who are you?" I whispered, though no rule permitted such direct communication. The frost shifted again, forming new words. "We are the watchers. We are the waiting. We were here before. We will be here after." That told me nothing. "What do you want?" I asked, breaking another unwritten rule by engaging with them. The frost patterns changed more rapidly now. Freedom, return, home. A terrible understanding began to dawn on me. If the previous watchman was right, if Tower 19 was a cage rather than a door, then these entities weren't trying to break in from another world. They were trying to break out, back to their world. And I was the key somehow. My transgressions the mechanism that would release them. But why me? Why now? As if reading my thoughts, the frost formed new words. "You are hollow, empty vessel, perfect host, a hollow, empty vessel." The words stung with truth. I had come here running from my failures, my broken marriage, my drinking problem. I had been hollowed out by grief and shame long before I reached Tower 19. But perfect host? For what? Before I could contemplate this further, a new sound broke the silence. The crackling static of the radio, though I hadn't turned it on. Through the static came a voice I recognized immediately as Ranger Hawkins. "Tower 19, emergency transmission. If you can hear this, do not, repeat, do not, allow the evacuation team to land tomorrow. It's not a real evacuation. Base has been compromised. The entities have..." The transmission dissolved into static, then returned, fainter. "Using our forms, our voices. The rules are the only protection. Breaking them is what they want. Stay in the tower. Follow the..." More static, then silence. Was this the real Hawkins, somehow broadcasting a warning? Or another deception? The frost writing suggested the entities wanted me to break the rules, but the previous watchman's notebook suggested the opposite. That following the rules was keeping me trapped. Who could I trust? The voices on the radio? The words in the frost? The manual's rules? The ramblings of a missing watchman? As I wrestled with these questions, a sudden realization hit me. The base operator had said to be ready for evacuation at 5:45 a.m. Sunrise at this latitude in July was around 5:30 a.m. I would only be breaking rule number 3 if I left before sunrise. 15 minutes after sunrise should be safe, unless that's exactly what they were counting on. Maybe the real evacuation order would come before sunset, forcing me to choose between breaking rule number 3 and missing my chance at rescue. My head throbbed with confusion and fatigue. I hadn't slept properly in days, and the constant vigilance was taking its toll. I needed to think clearly, to figure out what was real and what was manipulation. I checked the time, 1:17 a.m. Hours still until dawn, until the supposed evacuation. Hours to decide what to do. The frost on the windows had melted, leaving no trace of the strange messages. The blue candle burned steadily now, its flame returned to a normal blue color. The tower was warming up again. I opened the manual, studying the rules once more. Rule number 4 caught my eye, the one rule I hadn't encountered or referenced yet. Never destroy this manual or attempt to alter the rules. To do so invites immediate and irrevocable consequences. What if that was the key? Not following or breaking the rules, but rejecting the entire system? Destroying the manual itself? But no, that would be the 4th transgression. If the previous watchman was correct, that would fully open whatever barrier existed between worlds. If the frost messages were to be believed, that's exactly what the entities wanted. I was trapped in a double bind. To follow the rules might keep me imprisoned in some cosmic cage, serving as host or bait. To break them might release whatever was trying to get through from the other side. As I contemplated this impossible choice, a new sound reached me, a soft rhythmic tapping from the trapdoor. Not the violent pounding of the previous night, but gentle, almost hesitant. I approached cautiously. The tapping continued, undeniably coming from beneath the floor. "Who's there?" I called, throwing caution to the wind. The tapping stopped. Then, so faintly I had to strain to hear it, came a voice. "James, it's me." A man's voice, unfamiliar. "Who are you?" I demanded. "The previous watchman. I'm trapped. Between." "You found my notebook?" My skin crawled. "How do you know about that?" "I can see fragments, pieces of the tower, of you. The barriers are thin here." "What happened to you?" I asked, maintaining my distance from the trapdoor. "I broke all 4 rules. I thought it would free me, but it didn't. It trapped me here, in the in-between, neither fully there nor here." "What is this place? What's really happening?" A long pause. Tower 19 sits on a thin spot between realities. The entities on the other side, they want to come through. The rules keep the barrier intact. Breaking them weakens it. This contradicted both the notebook and the frost messages. "But your notebook said the rules are chains, not protection." "I was wrong," the voice said, pain evident in each word. "So wrong. They deceived me, manipulated me, made me think breaking the rules would free me from their influence. But it only gave them more power. Don't make my mistake, James." I wanted to believe him. It aligned with my experiences. The rules had protected me so far, but doubt lingered. This could be another trick. "Prove you're really the previous watchman," I challenged. "Tell me something only you would know." Another pause. "My name is Daniel Weiss. I came to Tower 19 after my wife Julie died in a car accident. I was running from grief, just like you're running from your failed marriage. We're similar, you and I. That's why they chose us both." Julie. His wife was also named Julie. The coincidence was too great. "They're using details from my notebook to manipulate you," the voice continued. "They know your weaknesses because they knew mine. Don't trust anything they show you." "What about the evacuation tomorrow? Is it real?" "I don't know. The entities can influence the outside world to some extent, especially as the barrier weakens. But they can't fully manifest there yet. That's what they need you for." "What should I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Follow the rules, all of them. Exactly as written. The manual is protection, not imprisonment. And whatever you do, don't break the fourth rule. Don't destroy the manual. That's what they want most of all." The tapping resumed, fainter now. "I'm losing connection. The in-between is shifting. Remember, James, 3 transgressions is dangerous. 4 is terminal. You've broken 1 rule already. Don't break anymore." The tapping faded away entirely. I stood staring at the trapdoor, conflicting theories warring in my mind. The previous watchman, if that really was him, claimed breaking the rules was what the entities wanted. But his own notebook had said the opposite. The Frost messages wanted me to break the rules. Ranger Hawkins's transmission had warned me to follow them. What was the truth? I returned to my cot, manual clutched to my chest, and watched the hours tick by. The tower remained quiet for the rest of the night. The only sounds the normal creaking of wood and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. At 4:30 a.m., with the first hints of dawn lightening the sky, the radio crackled to life for the scheduled hourly check-in. "Tower 19, this is base. Evacuation helicopter is en route. ETA 5:45 a.m. as planned. Are you ready to evacuate?" "Ready and waiting," I confirmed, still uncertain whether I was making the right choice. "Good. When the helicopter arrives, proceed immediately to the landing zone. Do not delay. Do not return to the tower for any reason. Is that understood?" "Understood. The pilot will give you a code word for final verification before boarding. The code word is threshold. Acknowledge receipt of code word." "Acknowledged. Code word is threshold." "Excellent. This will be our final radio communication. Proceed to the observation deck at 5:30 a.m. and wait for visual confirmation of the helicopter. Base out." I packed my few belongings into my backpack: clean clothes, toiletries, the manual, which I couldn't bring myself to leave behind, and the previous watchman's notebook. The rest I left behind. As 5:30 a.m. approached, the sky brightened with the coming sunrise. I checked my watch constantly, not wanting to step onto the observation deck even a minute before sunrise at 5:33 a.m. At exactly 5:33 a.m., I opened the door to the observation deck and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp and clear, the forest below shrouded in early mist. In the distance, I could make out Tower 14, looking perfectly normal in the dawn light. I scanned the skies for the helicopter but saw nothing yet. My watch read 5:37 a.m. It would be here soon. As I waited, a movement at the base of my tower caught my eye. Looking down, I saw a figure emerging from the trees, a ranger in the standard green uniform. Even from this height, I recognized Ranger Hawkins. He waved up at me, cupping his hands around his mouth to shout, "Reynolds! Don't trust the helicopter. It's them. Come down here now." I froze. If this was the real Hawkins, the one who had supposedly disappeared at Tower 14, how had he gotten here? And why was he telling me to come down rather than wait for the evacuation? But if it wasn't Hawkins, if it was one of them mimicking him again, why would they want me to come down from the tower? The previous watchman, or whatever had claimed to be him, had said to follow the rules, to stay in the tower. Hawkins continued shouting, "The entities have compromised base. The evacuation is a trap. I've got a vehicle waiting." In the distance, I heard it. The distinctive thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors. The evacuation team was coming. I had seconds to decide. Trust Hawkins and climb down, wait for the helicopter, or retreat back into the tower and refuse both options. The rotor sound grew louder. A black dot appeared on the horizon, rapidly growing larger. The helicopter was almost here. Hawkins became more frantic. "They're here! Get down now!" The helicopter closed in, its details becoming visible. A standard Forest Service rescue chopper, nothing unusual about it. I made my decision. The rules had protected me. The rules were the only constants in this nightmare. I would trust the rules one last time. I stepped back inside the tower and slammed the door, locking it securely. Through the window, I watched as the helicopter circled once, then began to descend toward the small clearing beside the tower that served as an emergency landing zone. Hawkins below was gesturing wildly, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. As the helicopter touched down, he stepped back into the tree line, disappearing from view. From the helicopter emerged two figures in Forest Service uniforms, a man and a woman, both carrying standard-issue gear. They approached the tower base, looking up at the observation deck where I'd been standing moments before. The woman raised a megaphone. "James Reynolds? This is the evacuation team. Please come down immediately. We need to leave the area." I watched silently through the window, making no move to comply. "Mr. Reynolds, this is a mandatory evacuation. The forest has been compromised. Multiple lookouts are missing. Please come down now." Still, I waited, watching for any sign that would confirm or deny their legitimacy. The man with her spoke into a radio, then turned back to the tower. Taking the megaphone, he called up, "Mr. Reynolds, code word threshold. Please confirm and descend immediately." The correct code word. That suggested they were legitimate. But the previous watchman had warned me not to trust anything, that the entities could influence the outside world. As I hesitated, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. Ranger Hawkins, or what looked like him, was emerging from the trees again. But something was wrong. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated, and his proportions, they seemed off, as if his limbs were slightly too long for his body. The evacuation team spotted him too. The woman's hand moved to her sidearm while the man spoke rapidly into his radio again. "Ranger Hawkins?" the woman called, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Is that you?" Hawkins didn't respond. He continued walking toward them with that strange, irregular gait. "Sir, please identify yourself," the woman called again, her hand now drawing her weapon. Hawkins stopped about 20 feet from them. Then, with a movement too quick to follow, he seemed to unfold. His body elongated, limbs extending to impossible lengths, his head swelling and distorting. What stood there was no longer human, a towering, spindly figure with too many joints and a face that was a twisted parody of human features. The woman fired her weapon. The shots echoed across the clearing, but the creature that had been Hawkins didn't fall. Instead, it lunged forward with blinding speed. What happened next was too fast and chaotic to fully process. The evacuation team fired repeatedly as they retreated toward the helicopter. The creature moved like lightning, its limbs stretching and contorting in ways that defied physics. There were screams, shots, the roar of the helicopter engine starting up, and then, abruptly, silence. The clearing below was empty. No evacuation team, no Hawkins creature, no helicopter. Just undisturbed morning mist drifting among the trees. Had I imagined it all? A hallucination born of stress and sleep deprivation? But there, at the edge of the clearing, something moved. A figure stepped out of the tree line. Ranger Hawkins again, looking completely normal. He raised his hand in greeting, then pointed to the tower door, miming for me to come down. Behind him, more figures emerged from the forest. The evacuation team, both appearing unharmed and ordinary. The helicopter sat in the clearing, rotors still, as if it had been there peacefully all along. Had I imagined the attack? The transformation? But I knew I hadn't. This was another deception, another attempt to lure me out. I retreated further into the tower, my decision made. I would not leave. I would follow the rules. I would wait. What I didn't know was what exactly I was waiting for. The radio crackled to life unexpectedly. Tower 19, please respond. The voice was different from the usual base operator, higher, with a slight tremor of urgency. I approached cautiously, but didn't respond. James Reynolds, if you can hear this, stay in the tower. Do not leave with the evacuation team. Repeat, do not evacuate. The team outside is not human. The real evacuation was scheduled for tomorrow. Please acknowledge if you're receiving this. I remained silent, watching through the window as the figures outside conferred with each other, occasionally glancing up at the tower. They looked completely normal now, no sign of the horrific transformation I'd witnessed. The radio continued. This is Dr. Eleanor Reed, Department of Paranormal Research. We've been monitoring the situation at Blackridge Forest. Tower 19 sits at a junction point between dimensions. The entities from the other side have been trying to break through for decades. The rules in your manual are containment protocols designed to keep the barrier intact. This aligned with what the voice beneath the trapdoor had told me, that the rules were protection, not imprisonment. James, please respond if you can hear me. We need to know you're still following the protocols. I hesitated, then picked up the receiver. This is Tower 19. I can hear you. I'm still in the tower. A sigh of relief came through the radio. Thank God. Listen carefully. The entities have been gaining strength. They've already compromised several towers, 14, 11, and 23. The Watchmen broke the rules, all 4 of them, which weakened the barriers at those locations. What do they want? I asked, watching as the figures outside began approaching the tower base. To come through fully into our world. They've been trapped in a pocket dimension for centuries, able to manifest only partially during specific times and under specific conditions. The towers were built as containment structures, each watchman trained to follow protocols that maintain the barriers. But I wasn't trained, I protested. They just gave me a manual. Yes, that was a mistake. Budget cuts led to reduced training. The manual was supposed to be supplemented with proper instruction. How many rules have you broken so far? Just 1, I admitted. I looked at Tower 14 during the forbidden time window. That's good. That's manageable. 1 transgression weakens the barrier slightly but doesn't breach it. The danger increases exponentially with each additional transgression. 4 breaks it completely. Outside, the Hawkins figure and the evacuation team had reached the base of the tower. I could hear them beginning to climb the stairs. They're trying to get in, I said urgently. The entities. They look like a ranger and an evacuation team. Draw a protective circle, Dr. Reed instructed. Use the symbols from page 86 of the manual. Quickly. I grabbed the manual and turned to page 86, finding the complex symbol I'd used during the previous attack. I mixed salt and ash. I had no fresh blood to add, and began drawing the circle on the floor as rapidly as I could. The footsteps on the stairs grew louder. A key rattled in the lock. They had a key? How was that possible? Hurry, James, Dr. Reed urged. Once the circle is complete, they cannot cross it, but you must complete it before they enter. The door handle turned. I frantically completed the final symbols of the circle, stepping inside just as the door swung open. Ranger Hawkins stood in the doorway, looking perfectly normal. Behind him were the evacuation team members, also appearing completely human. "Mr. Reynolds," Hawkins said calmly, "it's time to go. The helicopter is waiting." I stood within my circle, heart pounding. "You're not Ranger Hawkins." His expression didn't change. "Of course I am. You met me yesterday. I conducted the safety inspection. Now please gather your things. We need to leave immediately." "The real evacuation is tomorrow," I said. "You're not human." A flash of something, irritation, anger, crossed his face, quickly suppressed. "Mr. Reynolds, you're clearly suffering from isolation-induced paranoia. This is a common condition among fire lookouts. Please come with us. We have medical personnel standing by." His reasoning sounded plausible. Was I paranoid? Was Dr. Reed another hallucination or deception? "James, don't listen to them." Dr. Reed's voice came through the radio. "Stay in the circle. They cannot cross it." Hawkins's attention shifted to the radio. His expression hardened. "Turn that off, Mr. Reynolds. Base communications have been compromised." He took a step forward and stopped abruptly, as if he'd walked into an invisible wall. His eyes dropped to the circle on the floor, and his face contorted with frustration. "Clever," he said, his voice changing, deepening. "Very clever. But how long do you think you can stay in there? Hours? Days? Weeks? You'll need to eat, sleep, use the bathroom, and when you step out of that circle..." The woman behind him smiled, the expression unnaturally wide. "We'll be waiting. We are very patient, James Reynolds. We've waited centuries. We can wait a little longer." "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "Just one more transgression," Hawkins said, his voice almost gentle. "Just one more. Then another. Then you'll be free. We'll all be free." "Don't listen, James," Dr. Reed urged. "They're lying. If you break all 4 rules, the barrier collapses completely. They'll be able to come through fully into our world." "And what's wrong with that?" the woman asked, her head tilting at an angle just slightly too far to be natural. "We were here first, after all. This was our world before we were trapped, exiled to the space between. We just want to come home." "They were exiled for a reason," Dr. Reed countered. "They feed on human consciousness, human emotion. They would consume humanity from within." Hawkins's form flickered briefly, showing something else beneath, something with too many limbs and eyes. "Such dramatic language," he said, his voice normal again. "We offer transcendence, not consumption. The previous watchmen understood. They welcomed us." "The previous watchmen are trapped in the in-between," I said, remembering the voice beneath the trapdoor. "Neither here nor there. Is that the freedom you offer?" A shadow passed over Hawkins's face. "Transition is difficult for some, but necessary. The first must open the way for the rest. The door must be opened fully before we can all return." "And I'm supposed to be the doorman?" I asked bitterly. "You are more than that," the woman said. "You are the key, the hollow vessel, the perfect host for the first to fully cross over. Not just a doorman, a host body for whatever wanted to come through first." "What happens to me in this arrangement?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Hawkins smiled. "You would be part of something greater. Your consciousness would join with ours. Your memories, experiences, emotions would live on within the collective." "In other words, I cease to exist," I said flatly. "Individual existence is overrated," the woman replied. "So lonely, so limited. Wouldn't you rather be part of something vast, eternal, magnificent?" "James, Don't engage with them, Dr. Reed warned. They're manipulators, masters of deception. Stay in the circle and wait for the real evacuation tomorrow. Hawkins's patience seemed to be wearing thin. His form flickered again, more noticeably this time. Enough games. The barrier is already weakening. You've broken one rule. Break the next two, and we can help you with the fourth. Or resist, and we'll find another way. He turned to leave. We'll be waiting, James. When you're ready to embrace your destiny, break the second rule. We'll know. The three figures retreated, closing the door behind them. I heard their footsteps descending the stairs, then silence. Are they gone? Dr. Reed asked. I moved to the window, careful not to break the circle, and looked out. The clearing was empty. No helicopter, no figures. Even Ranger Hawkins's truck was gone. They're gone, I confirmed. For now. Good. Listen carefully, James. The real evacuation team will arrive tomorrow at 10 a.m., a full tactical team with specialists in paranormal containment. Until then, you must follow every rule in the manual exactly. No more transgressions. The barrier must hold for one more day. And if I can't hold out? If I break another rule by mistake? A pause. 2 transgressions weakens the barrier significantly, but doesn't breach it. 3 makes it permeable. The entities can partially manifest, as you've seen. 4 breaks it completely. At all costs, avoid the 4th transgression. I looked down at the circle I stood in, the symbol that had protected me. How long will this circle last? 24 hours at most. It requires renewal after that, but it should be enough until the team arrives. And they'll know what to do? How to fix this? Another pause, longer this time. They'll stabilize the situation. The containment has been compromised at multiple sites. Tower 19 is the linchpin. If we can maintain the barrier there, we have a chance to restore the others. She wasn't answering my question directly, which concerned me. What aren't you telling me, Doctor? Reed? A sigh came through the radio. The entities are stronger than they've ever been. The barriers at Towers 14, 11, and 23 have failed completely. Conventional containment methods may not be sufficient anymore. The team coming tomorrow may need to implement more drastic measures. What kind of drastic measures? I asked, suddenly wary. The pause stretched for so long I thought she might not answer. Tower 19 was built as both a containment structure and a failsafe. If the barrier cannot be restored, the entire site might need to be neutralized. Neutralized, I repeated numbly. You mean destroyed, with me in it. That's the absolute last resort, she assured me quickly. We have other methods to try first, but you need to be prepared for all possibilities. I laughed bitterly. So, my choices are become a host for interdimensional entities or get blown up with the tower. Fantastic. I'm sorry, James. I truly am. But the stakes are unimaginably high. If the entities break through completely, the consequences would be catastrophic on a global scale. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. All right, I'll follow the rules. I'll hold out until tomorrow. But I want your word that the evacuation team will do everything possible to get me out of here alive. You have it, she said firmly. I'll be with them personally. Now, I need to coordinate with the team. Keep this channel open, but I may be silent for periods of time. Remember, follow every rule precisely. No more transgressions. Understood. As the radio fell silent, I sank down inside my protective circle, suddenly exhausted. The manual sat beside me, its weathered cover seeming to mock me with its simplicity. Just a book of rules that stood between me and annihilation, or possession by entities from another dimension. What a mess I'd gotten myself into. All I'd wanted was an escape from my failed marriage, a quiet job in the wilderness to sort out my life. Instead, I'd walked into a cosmic horror show. I checked my watch, 6:45 a.m. Over 27 hours until the real evacuation team would arrive. 27 hours of precisely following rules, avoiding transgressions, and hoping the barrier held. At least now I understood what was happening. The rules weren't chains binding me. They were protocols maintaining the dimensional barrier. Tower 19 wasn't a prison. It was a fortification against something trying to break through from the other side. And I was the unwitting guardian of the gate, chosen not for any special quality, but because I was hollow, empty enough to make a good vessel for whatever wanted to come through first. As the morning light strengthened, I began to prepare for the long wait ahead. I would need food, water, rest, all while maintaining the protective circle and following every time-specific rule in the manual. 27 hours. I could do this. I had to. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I remained within my protective circle, carefully following each rule in the manual as its time came, winding the compass at noon, counting clouds before sunset, placing offerings on the windowsills. For each task that required me to leave the circle, I moved with deliberate caution, completing the ritual as quickly as possible before returning to safety. Dr. Reed checked in periodically, her voice a welcome reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. The evacuation team was assembling, she told me. Specialists in paranormal containment, armed with equipment designed to stabilize the barrier. They would arrive at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I just had to hold out until then. As afternoon faded into evening, the atmosphere in the tower began to change. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin like a physical weight. Shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more substantial, as if they had mass and volume rather than being mere absences of light. Rule number 18. If shadows behave unnaturally, light all candles immediately and speak no words until the shadows return to normal. I lit every candle I had left, creating a warm glow throughout the tower that pushed back the thickening darkness. In silence, I watched the shadows retreat to their proper places, becoming once again simple silhouettes cast by objects in the candlelight. The quiet was oppressive. No birds called outside, no insects chirped, not even the usual creaking of the tower broke the stillness. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. At 7:43 p.m., exactly as the sun disappeared below the horizon, the radio crackled to life. "James? Are you there?" Dr. Reed's voice sounded strained. I picked up the receiver. "I'm here, still following the rules." "Good. Listen, there's been a development. The entities are getting more active. We're seeing increased anomalies around towers 14, 11, and 23. Energy readings are spiking. Whatever's trying to come through is gathering strength." "What does that mean for me?" "It means they might try something more. Direct. The protective circle should hold, but be prepared for anything. They'll use every trick they know to get you to break another rule." As if her words had summoned them, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Not a wolf or coyote, but something that made my skin crawl. It was followed by another, then another, until a chorus of eerie wails surrounded the tower. "Do you hear that?" I asked Dr. Reed. "Hear what?" "James, what's happening?" "Howling. All around the tower. It doesn't sound like any animal I've ever heard." She was silent for a moment. "There's nothing in the rules about howling. This might be a new tactic. Stay vigilant." The howls grew closer, more frenzied. Then abruptly, they stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. A sharp crack came from directly below the tower, like something heavy striking the support beams. then another, and another. Methodical, powerful blows that shook the entire structure. "They're trying to bring down the tower," I said, a cold certainty settling in my gut. "They can't," Dr. Reed replied confidently. "The towers are reinforced with more than just physical materials. The same barriers that keep them out strengthen the structures themselves." Another series of blows rattled the tower, stronger than before. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. "It certainly feels like they're making progress," I muttered. "Stay in the circle. Follow the rules. The barrier will hold." The attacks on the tower continued for nearly an hour. Vicious impacts that seemed to come from all directions at once. Each time, the tower shuddered but remained standing. Eventually, the assault tapered off, the blows becoming less frequent and powerful, until they stopped entirely. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "I think they've given up." "For now, Doctor," Reed cautioned. "They're testing the defenses, looking for weaknesses. This is just the beginning." She was right. As night deepened, the entities tried new approaches. The temperature fluctuated wildly, freezing cold 1 minute, stifling heat the next. The radio emitted strange frequencies that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Whispers emerged from the walls, too faint to make out individual words, but persistent enough to fray my nerves. Around midnight, I began to see things in my peripheral vision. Darting shadows, elongated limbs, faces that appeared and vanished in the grain of the wooden walls. Each time I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. But the moment my attention shifted, they returned. Rule number 21. If you see movement in your peripheral vision after midnight, do not look directly at it. Keep your gaze fixed on the manual until sunrise. I opened the manual and stared at its pages, fighting the overwhelming urge to look at the shapes that now moved freely around the edges of my vision. They grew bolder, larger, creeping closer to my protective circle. My eyes burned from the strain of keeping them fixed on the manual. My neck ached with the effort of not turning. The shapes in my peripheral vision became more distinct, towering figures with impossibly thin limbs and bulbous heads moving with a jerky, unsettling grace. "They're in the tower," I whispered to Dr. Reed, my eyes still locked on the manual. "I can see them. Rule 21 says not to look directly at them." "Good. Keep following that rule. Direct observation can strengthen their presence in our reality. As long as you don't acknowledge them fully, they can't manifest completely." The hours crept by in agonizing slowness. The entities circled my protective barrier, occasionally reaching toward it with limbs that seemed to elongate and contract at will. I could feel their frustration growing, their movements becoming more erratic and aggressive. At 3:17 a.m., the exact time I'd heard knocking from the trapdoor nights before, every candle in the tower extinguished simultaneously. Darkness engulfed me, broken only by faint moonlight filtering through the windows. Rule number 13. If all light sources fail simultaneously, remain absolutely still and recite your full name backward 3 times. Fighting panic, I remained frozen in place, my eyes still fixed on the now invisible manual. "Stlonier Semaj," I whispered. "Stlonier Semaj, Stlonier Semaj." The darkness pulsed, as if alive and breathing. Then, slowly, the candles reignited one by one, their flames unnaturally steady and blue-tinged. In their light, I could see that the entities had retreated to the corners of the tower. They remained visible in my peripheral vision, but more subdued now, watching and waiting. "They're getting desperate," Dr. Reed said when I described what had happened. "The fact that they're using increasingly direct methods suggests the barrier is holding. Keep going, James. Just a few more hours until dawn. But as the night wore on, the entities found a new approach, one far more insidious than physical attacks or visual manifestations. James? A voice called softly. Julie's voice, coming from directly behind me. James, I need to tell you something important. I kept my eyes on the manual, remembering rule number 21. You're not Julie. No, I'm not, the voice admitted, changing subtly. But I have information you need. About the rules. About what's really happening. I'm not interested, I said firmly. The evacuation team isn't coming to save you, the voice continued, ignoring my dismissal. They're coming to eliminate you. You're as much a liability as an asset now. The moment you broke the first rule, you became contaminated in their eyes. Despite my resolve, doubt crept in. Dr. Reed had mentioned neutralizing the site as a last resort. What if the voice was right? Think about it, the voice urged. They built these towers knowing what would happen. They placed unwitting watchmen here to maintain the barriers, never telling them the truth until it was too late. You're expendable to them. Just another component in their containment system. Shut up, I hissed. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. There's another way, the voice said, gentle and persuasive. Break the next rule deliberately, then the next. When the barrier is thin enough, we can show you the truth, show you what lies beyond. It's not what they've told you. It's freedom, understanding, power beyond anything you've imagined. Why should I believe you? Because we've been watching you your entire life, James Reynolds. We know how your father belittled you, how your mother never protected you, how Julie left when things got difficult, just like everyone else in your life. We know the real reason you lost your job, the mistake you made that cost 3 people their lives, the mistake you've been running from. No one knew about that. I'd covered it up, blamed equipment failure rather than my own negligence. The resulting lawsuit had been settled quietly, the records sealed. We know everything about you, the voice continued. Your fears, your desires, your deepest shame. And we don't judge you for any of it. We offer acceptance, understanding, a chance to be part of something greater than yourself. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the voice. Doctor? Reed, I called into the radio. They're trying to get inside my head. They know things they shouldn't know. Static was my only answer. The radio had gone dead. They've abandoned you, the voice said, closer now. Just like everyone else. But we never will. We've always been here waiting for you. You belong with us, James. You always have. No, I whispered, but my conviction was wavering. Look at me, the voice urged. Just once, break the rule. See the truth for yourself. The temptation was overwhelming. What if everything I'd been told was a lie? What if Dr. Reed and her team were the real threat? What if the entities truly offered understanding and acceptance rather than consumption and destruction? My neck muscles tensed, ready to turn. My eyes began to lift from the manual. Just one look. One transgression. What harm could it do? Then I remembered the previous watchman's notebook. I broke all 4 rules. I thought it would free me, but it didn't. It trapped me here, in the in-between, neither fully there nor here. He had been manipulated just as I was being manipulated now, made to believe that breaking the rules would bring freedom rather than imprisonment. The entities were masters of deception, using personal truths against me. No, I said firmly, forcing my eyes back to the manual. I won't break another rule. The voice hissed in frustration, dropping all pretense of being Julie. Fool! You think you have a choice? The barrier weakens by the hour. With or without your cooperation, We will come through, and when we do, your suffering will be legendary." "Until then, you're stuck on that side," I retorted, finding strength in defiance. "So I suggest you get comfortable." A scream of rage rattled the windows, not a human sound, but something ancient and terrible. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on every surface. The protective circle around me glowed briefly, pushing back against the cold. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the assault ceased. The temperature normalized. The presence in my peripheral vision receded. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. Dawn was approaching. I had survived the night. Dr. Reed's voice came through the radio, crackling with static, but audible. "James? James, are you there? We lost contact for several hours." "I'm here," I replied, relief flooding through me. They tried everything to get me to break another rule. They knew things, personal things no one could know. "They're telepathic to some degree," she explained. "They can access surface memories, emotional traumas, personal secrets. It's one of their most effective weapons." "Well, it almost worked," I admitted, but I kept following the rules. "Excellent. The evacuation team is on schedule, just a few more hours. How are you holding up?" "Exhausted, hungry, thirsty, but still in one piece. Try to rest if you can. The protective circle will hold. I need to coordinate with the team, but I'll check in hourly." As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, the entities that had tormented me all night retreated completely. The tower felt lighter somehow, the air clearer. I remained within my protective circle, but allowed myself to slump against the wall, eyes closing in exhaustion. I must have dozed off because I jerked awake to the sound of the radio crackling. "Emergency bulletin to all Forest Service personnel," an unfamiliar voice announced. "Extreme fire danger in Black Ridge National Forest. All personnel are ordered to evacuate immediately. Repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately." I checked my watch, 8:17 a.m. The evacuation team wasn't due for nearly 2 more hours. "Dr. Reed?" I called into the radio. "Dr. Reed, are you there?" No response. Just the same emergency bulletin repeating. Through the windows, I could see smoke beginning to rise from the direction of Tower 14. Actual smoke this time, not the unnatural kind I'd seen before. The forest was on fire. I scanned the horizon frantically. The smoke was spreading quickly, driven by wind that hadn't been present earlier. Multiple fire fronts were developing in a ring around my tower. Was this real? Or another deception by the entities? The timing seemed too convenient, just hours before the evacuation team was due to arrive. I checked the manual for any rule about fires or evacuations. There was nothing specific, but rule number 3 came to mind. Never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise. It was past sunrise now, so technically I could leave without breaking that rule. But what about the protective circle? It was my only defense against the entities. If I left it to evacuate, I'd be vulnerable. The smoke was thickening, becoming visible even from a distance. If this was a real fire, I didn't have much time. Fire in dry forest can spread at terrifying speeds, and the drought had left Black Ridge tinderbox dry. What if this was the entity's final play? Creating the illusion of a forest fire to force me out of the tower, away from the protective rules and rituals that had kept me safe? But if it was real, staying meant certain death. The radio crackled again. "Tower 19, this is Fire Command. Evacuate immediately. Fire is approaching from all directions. You have minutes, not hours." Still no word from Dr. Reed. No way to verify if this was legitimate or another trick. I moved to the window, straining to see through the smoke. In the distance, I could make out the orange glow of actual flames now. consuming the drought-stricken trees with hungry efficiency. The heat was becoming noticeable even inside the tower. This seemed too elaborate to be an illusion. I could feel the temperature rising, smell the smoke that was beginning to seep through the windows. The floor beneath my feet was warming. Fire approaching the base of the tower. I had to make a decision. Stay and potentially burn alive, or leave and risk falling into the entity's trap. The radio came to life again, but this time it was Dr. Reed's voice. "James, the fire is real. The entities have somehow influenced natural conditions. They've started an actual forest fire to flush you out. The evacuation team is redirecting, but they won't reach you before the fire does. You need to leave now." "But the rules," I began. "The primary rule is survival," she cut in urgently. "The manual is designed for containment under normal conditions. This is not normal. If you die in that tower, the barrier loses its human component. It will fail completely." Human component? What did that mean? I didn't have time to contemplate it as smoke began filling the tower in earnest. "Head northeast," Dr. Reed continued. "There's a river about 2 miles from your position. The fire hasn't jumped it yet. The team will find you there." I gathered my few essentials: the manual, the previous watchman's notebook, water, my knife, and stuffed them into my backpack. The smoke was getting thick now, making my eyes water and my lungs burn. As I prepared to step out of the protective circle for the last time, a terrible thought struck me. What if this voice wasn't really Dr. Reed? What if the entities had finally managed to mimic her perfectly, just to trick me into leaving? But the heat was real. The smoke was real. I could hear the roar of approaching flames. Stay and definitely die, or leave and possibly fall into a trap. Some choice. I took a deep breath of the increasingly toxic air and stepped out of the circle. Immediately, I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if countless eyes were watching me from the smoke-filled corners of the tower. "I'm leaving the tower," I told the radio, "heading northeast toward the river." "Good," Dr. Reed replied. "Move quickly but carefully. The team will find you. And James, whatever happens, keep the manual with you. The rules still apply, even outside the tower." With one last look at the protective circle that had kept me safe through the night, I opened the door and descended the stairs. Smoke engulfed me immediately, thick and choking. The heat was intense, the roar of the fire now clearly audible. At the base of the tower, I oriented myself northeast using the compass, the same one I'd been winding at noon each day, and began to run. Behind me, flames were already licking at the lower supports of Tower 19. Whether by chance or design, I was now outside the containment structure, away from the rules and rituals that had kept the barrier intact. I was in the forest, running for my life, with entities from another dimension potentially in pursuit. And somewhere ahead, hopefully, was Dr. Reed and the evacuation team. If they were real. If they were coming at all. Through the smoke and chaos, I could swear I heard laughter. Not human laughter, but something ancient and terrible, full of anticipation and malice. Tower 19 was burning. The door was opening, and I was running straight into the unknown. The forest was transformed into a hellscape. Smoke billowed between the trees, reducing visibility to mere feet. Flames leapt from treetop to treetop with terrifying speed, creating a canopy of fire above me. The heat was suffocating, the roar deafening. I ran blindly, guided only by the compass and the desperate hope that Dr. Reed's directions were genuine, 2 miles northeast to the river. My lungs burned with each breath. My eyes streamed from the smoke. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to find clearer air, but I knew stopping meant death. Behind me, through the curtain of smoke, I heard Tower 19 collapse with a tremendous crash. The sound sent a chill through me despite the inferno's heat. The containment structure was gone. Whatever protection it had offered was now destroyed. I stumbled over unseen roots and rocks, falling repeatedly only to scramble back to my feet and continue running. My throat was raw, each breath a knife edge of pain. The weight of my backpack, with the manual inside, seemed to grow heavier with each step. Through the chaos, I tried to keep track of the rules. What time was it? Around 8:45 a.m., I guessed. Was there a rule I needed to follow at this time? My smoke-addled brain couldn't recall. A massive pine crashed to the ground ahead of me, sending up a shower of embers. I veered to the side, disoriented, checking the compass again. Still northeast, though I'd been forced to detour. "James Reynolds," a voice called from within the smoke. It sounded like Ranger Hawkins. "This way." I found a clear path. I hesitated. Was this the real Hawkins somehow miraculously alive, or another entity trying to lure me off course? "James, hurry!" the voice called again, more urgently. Rule number 5 flashed through my mind. If you hear your name called 3 times in succession, do not respond, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. This wasn't exactly 3 times in succession, but close enough to make me wary. I ignored the voice and continued in the direction the compass indicated. "James!" The voice distorted, losing its human quality entirely, becoming a snarling, inhuman roar of frustration. "You're going the wrong way!" I picked up my pace, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the trembling in my legs. The manual bounced against my back with each step, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Through the trees ahead, I caught a glimpse of movement. Tall, elongated figures moving with that strange, jerky grace I'd observed from my peripheral vision in the tower. They were here in the forest, no longer confined to shadows and half-glimpses. The barrier was weakening. I changed direction slightly, trying to avoid them while still heading generally northeast. The smoke shifted, visibility improving momentarily, and I saw what appeared to be a clearing ahead. Hoping it might offer a better path, I made for it. As I burst into the open space, I skidded to a halt, horror freezing me in place. This wasn't a natural clearing. The trees had been altered, twisted and contorted into impossible shapes, their trunks and branches forming a perfect circle. At the center of this circle was a symbol burned into the ground, identical to the protective circle I'd drawn in the tower, but inverted somehow wrong. And standing around this inverted circle were figures, human in basic shape, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles and faces that shifted and changed even as I looked at them. Some I recognized, Ranger Hawkins, the evacuation team members, even a grotesque parody of Julie. They hadn't seen me yet, focused instead on whatever ritual they were performing around the inverted circle. The air above the symbol rippled and distorted, like heat waves but more structured, forming patterns that hurt my eyes. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. My foot caught on a branch, snapping it with a crack that seemed deafening in the momentary lull of the fire's roar. As one, the entities turned toward me. Their faces, if they could be called faces, shifted into expressions of hungry anticipation. "The vessel arrives," one said in a voice like grinding stones. "The key approaches." "3 transgressions complete," another hissed. "1 remains." 3? I had only broken 1 rule deliberately, looking at Tower 14 during the forbidden time. Had I inadvertently broken others without realizing? "The tower burns," a third entity intoned. "The circle breaks." The door opens. They began to move toward me, with that unnatural, jerky grace. I turned to run, but found my path blocked by more of them, emerging from the smoke like nightmares given form. I was surrounded, the manual pressed against my back, suddenly feeling like the most important object in the world. Whatever happened, I couldn't let them take it. I couldn't break the fourth rule. "Give us the book, James Reynolds," the entity wearing Ranger Hawkins's form said, extending a hand that elongated impossibly as it reached for me. "Complete the final transgression. Open the door fully." "Never," I gasped, my voice raw from smoke inhalation. "You have no choice," another said, this one wearing the face of the female evacuation team member. "The barrier fails. We come through with or without your assistance, but your cooperation would make the transition smoother for everyone." "For you, maybe," I retorted, "not for humanity." The entity that looked like Julie smiled, the expression stretching her face in ways that should have been impossible. Humanity had its chance. This world was ours first. We merely reclaim what was taken. They continued advancing, closing the circle around me. I clutched the backpack to my chest, mind racing. I had no weapons, no protective circle, no tower rules to save me. Just the manual itself and whatever rules still applied outside the containment structure. "The rules," I muttered to myself. "What rules still work here?" I desperately tried to recall any rule that might apply to my current situation. Rule number 21 about peripheral vision wouldn't help. They were fully visible now. Rule number 3 about leaving the tower was already broken by necessity. Then it hit me. Rule number 27. In case of direct assault, create a circle of protection. Mix salt, your blood, and ash from the fireplace. Draw the symbol from page 86 on the ground and stand within it. Do not leave the circle until the assault ends, no matter what you see or hear. I had salt in my pocket. I'd grabbed a handful before leaving the tower. Blood I could provide from my already lacerated hands. And ash? The forest fire had created plenty of that. Moving as quickly as I dared, I pulled the salt from my pocket and began pouring it in a circle around me, adding ash from the burning forest floor. I sliced my palm deeper with my knife, letting blood drip into the mixture. "He protects himself," one entity hissed. "Stop him!" They lunged forward, but not quickly enough. I completed the rough circle and began drawing the symbol from memory. The 5-pointed star, the strange glyphs, the interconnected smaller circles. As I completed the final line, a pulse of energy rippled outward from the circle. The entities recoiled, shrieking in frustration and rage. They circled just outside the boundary, testing it, searching for weaknesses. "It won't hold," the Hawkins entity said. "Not here, not outside the tower. The containment is failing." He was right. Already I could see the circle's energy flickering, the barrier it created wavering. Unlike in the tower, where the rules had the full power of the containment structure behind them, here in the forest, my hastily drawn circle was a desperate stopgap at best. I needed to move. The river couldn't be far now, if I could reach it before the circle failed completely. I removed the manual from my backpack, clutching it to my chest with one hand while keeping the other extended, trying to maintain the failing barrier through sheer force of will. "Northeast," I muttered, checking the compass again. The river should be just beyond the next ridge. If I could break through this circle of entities, I might make it. But they seemed to sense my intentions. They spread out, blocking all possible escape routes, watching with those shifting, inhuman eyes as my protective circle weakened by the second. The fire was closing in too, advancing through the trees on all sides. The smoke was thicker now, making it hard to see the entities clearly, though perhaps that was a blessing. I was trapped between fire and nightmare, with a failing protective circle and a manual of rules that seemed increasingly useless outside the tower. The radio in my pocket crackled suddenly to life. "James!" Dr. Reed's voice, barely audible through the static. "We've triangulated your position. We're approaching from the east. ETA 3 minutes. Hold your position." Hope surged through me. They were coming. Help was minutes away. "They're here?" I called to the entities, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Your plan failed." The Hawkins entity laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "They won't reach you in time. The circle fails. The door opens." As if to punctuate his words, my protective circle flickered violently, sections of it fading completely before sputtering back into existence. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, playing for time. "Why me specifically?" "You were chosen," the Julie entity said. "Empty, hollow, the perfect vessel for the first to come through." "I'm not empty," I protested. "I have a life, memories, relationships." "Failed relationships," another entity corrected. "Failed career, failed marriage, failed life. You came to Tower 19 running from your failures, your emptiness. That emptiness calls to us, resonates with the void between worlds." The words stung with truth. I had been empty, hollowed out by grief and shame. But standing here, fighting for my life and potentially the world, I didn't feel empty anymore. I felt rage, determination, purpose. "You're wrong," I said firmly. "I'm not empty, and I'm not yours to take." The protective circle flickered again, longer this time. The entities tensed, preparing to lunge the moment it failed completely. Through the trees to the east, I heard something. Engines, voices, movement. The evacuation team. They were close. "James," Dr. Reed's voice called. "We're almost there. Hold on." The Hawkins entity snarled in frustration. "They will not interfere. The transition is almost complete." With a surge of horrifying strength, he thrust his elongated hand directly at my protective circle. Where it touched, the barrier shattered like glass, creating an opening. The other entities immediately pushed forward, reaching for me with those two long limbs, those too many jointed fingers. In desperation, I opened the manual, flipping frantically to page 86, where the protective circle was described. There had to be something more, some way to strengthen it. As I turned the page, I saw it, tiny script at the bottom that I hadn't noticed before. In dire extremity, when all other protections fail, the manual itself may be employed as a final barrier. But beware. To use the book thus is to destroy it, breaking rule number 4. Rule number 4. Never destroy this manual or attempt to alter the rules. To do so invites immediate and irrevocable consequences. The entities were pushing through the broken section of my circle now, their limbs stretching toward me, toward the manual. The evacuation team's voices were closer, but not close enough. I had seconds to decide. Breaking rule number 4 would be the 4th transgression, the one that would fully open the barrier between worlds. But if I didn't, the entities would take the manual anyway, and me with it. "The book, James Reynolds," the Hawkins entity demanded, his hand inches from my face. "Give us the book. Complete the cycle. Open the door." Time seemed to slow. In that moment of crystal clarity, I understood. The entities didn't just want the manual. They needed me to break rule number 4 voluntarily. They needed me to complete the 4th transgression of my own free will. That was the key, my willing participation in opening the door. "Never," I whispered. With sudden resolve, I ripped a page from the manual, not to destroy it, but to use it as the instructions suggested. Holding the page out like a shield, I focused all my will into it, imagining it as an extension of the protective circle. The effect was immediate and shocking. The page burst into blue flame, the fire spreading instantly to engulf the entire manual without burning my hands. The entities recoiled, shrieking in what sounded like genuine fear. The burning manual pulsed with energy, pushing the entities back beyond my broken circle. The flames burned with supernatural intensity, but they didn't consume the pages. Instead, the fire seemed to be activating something within the text itself, causing the strange symbols and rules to glow with inner light. This wasn't destruction. It was transformation. I wasn't breaking rule number 4. I was fulfilling the manual's ultimate purpose.
"No!"
The Hawkins entity howled.
"Not like this! The door must open! The way must be cleared!"
The burning manual continued to pulse with energy, each wave pushing the entities further back. The flames spread to encompass me as well, but they didn't burn. They were cool, almost soothing against my smoke-ravaged skin. Through the trees, figures appeared, humans in tactical gear, led by a woman I assumed must be Dr. Reed. They raised strange-looking weapons, firing not bullets but beams of intense light that struck the entities, causing them to writhe and distort.
"James,"
Dr. Reed called,
"use the manual."
"Complete the transformation." The manual was changing in my hands, the pages rearranging themselves, the text flowing and shifting to form new patterns, new rules. This wasn't destruction, it was evolution. The manual was becoming something new, something more powerful. Understanding flooded through me. Tower 19 wasn't just a containment structure. It was a transformation engine. The rules weren't just barriers. They were a process, a method of channeling and controlling the energy that leaked through from the other side. And I wasn't just a watchman. I was a catalyst, chosen specifically for this moment. With newfound clarity, I held the transforming manual high, letting its energy flow through me and outward. The entities screeched and contorted, caught in the wave of power that emanated from the book. "By the power of these rules," I intoned, words coming to me from nowhere and everywhere, "I seal the way. I close the door. I reject your passage and deny your claim." The manual flared blindingly bright, then imploded, collapsing into a singularity of pure energy that hovered between my hands for one breathtaking moment before expanding outward in a shockwave that knocked me off my feet. As I fell, I saw the entities disintegrating, their forms unraveling like smoke in a strong wind. Their screams faded, replaced by a high, pure note that seemed to resonate with the fabric of reality itself. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Dr. Reed running toward me, her face a mixture of awe and concern, and behind her, the forest fire mysteriously dying out, the flames extinguishing as if a giant hand had snuffed them. Then darkness claimed me, and I knew no more. I awoke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell of a medical facility. My throat felt raw, my lungs heavy. Oxygen flowed through a nasal cannula. Bandages covered my hands and various other burns and cuts. Dr. Eleanor Reed sat beside my bed, looking exhausted but relieved. She was younger than I'd expected, early 40s perhaps, with prematurely gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and intelligent eyes that studied me carefully. "Welcome back," she said when she saw I was awake. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." "The entities," I croaked, my voice barely functioning. "The barrier." "Sealed," she said firmly, "more completely than we've ever managed before. What you did with the manual, it wasn't just containment. It was closure. You didn't just push them back. You shut the door entirely. I tried to process this. The manual, it changed. It wasn't destruction. It was transformation," she finished for me. Yes, we suspected this might be possible theoretically, but no one had ever successfully completed the process. The manual was designed to evolve if the right catalyst, the right person, activated its full potential. Why me? I asked, the question that had haunted me throughout the ordeal. She smiled slightly. We don't choose the watchman for Tower 19 randomly, James. We look for specific psychological profiles, specific emotional states, people who have experienced loss, failure, emptiness, but who have the potential for tremendous growth and transformation. You used me, I accused weakly. We gave you an opportunity, she corrected gently, to save yourself while saving others, and you succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. I looked down at my bandaged hands. The previous watchman, Daniel Weiss. What happened to him? Dr. Reed's expression grew somber. He broke all 4 rules deliberately, believing the entity's lies that it would free him. Instead, it created a partial opening between worlds. He became trapped in the in-between, neither fully here nor there. We couldn't save him. I heard him, I said. Under the trapdoor, he warned me. She nodded. Part of him remained connected to our reality, trying to warn subsequent watchmen of his fate. You're the first who listened. And the others? Towers 14, 11, 23. Compromised but contained now. Your actions created a cascading effect, strengthening all the barriers simultaneously. She leaned forward, her expression intent. You did something remarkable, James. Something we didn't think was possible. What happens now? I asked. Now you rest, recover, and then... She hesitated. We have other facilities that could use someone with your unique experience, if you're interested. I considered this. 3 weeks ago, I had taken the fire lookout job to escape my failed life, to hide from my mistakes and shame. Now I was being offered a chance to do something meaningful, something important. I'll think about it, I said. Dr. Reed nodded, understanding in her eyes. Take your time. There's no rush. She stood to leave. Oh, and one more thing. This was found clutched in your hand after the event. We couldn't pry it loose until you were stabilized. She handed me a small leather-bound notebook, not the previous watchman's journal, but something new, its pages filled with writing I didn't recognize. What is it? I asked, turning it over in my bandaged hands. We're not entirely sure, she admitted, but we think it might be the next iteration. The new rules, perhaps, for whatever comes next. She left me alone with the notebook, questions swirling in my mind. I opened it carefully, reading the first line written in flowing script. The door is sealed, but other doors exist. The watchers must remain vigilant. The rules have changed, but the duty remains. Begin again. Outside my hospital window for a moment, just a moment, the shadows seemed to move in ways they shouldn't, stretching toward me with purpose and intent. I blinked, and they were normal again. Just ordinary shadows cast by ordinary objects. But I knew better now. The world contained layers of reality most people never glimpsed, doors between dimensions that needed guarding, entities that hungered for entry. And somehow, I had become a guardian of those doors. Not because I was special or powerful, but because I had been empty enough to be filled with purpose. The notebook felt warm in my hands, alive with potential and possibility. Whatever came next, I would be ready. The rules had changed, but the duty remained. And this time, I was embracing it with open eyes. 6 months later, I stood on a windswept hilltop overlooking a different forest in a different state. Behind me stood a structure that resembled a fire lookout tower, only in the most superficial ways. Its true purpose was known to very few. Dr. Reed, Eleanor, as I now called her, had been right about the notebook. It contained new rules, new protocols, designed not just for containment, but for active defense against incursions from beyond. I had spent months studying it, internalizing its instructions, preparing for this moment. The Department of Paranormal Research had built this facility based on the knowledge gained from what they now called the Tower 19 incident. I was its first guardian, its first watchman, though that title had been officially changed to barrier technician. In my pocket was a photograph I kept as a reminder. It showed Tower 19, or what remained of it after the fire, a blackened skeleton against the sky. The site was now restricted, surrounded by government fencing and warning signs about environmental hazards. The real reason for the restrictions was known only to those with the highest clearance. I checked my watch. 5:27 p.m. Time for the first ritual of the evening. I opened the notebook to page 17 and began reciting the incantation written there, my voice steady and confident. As I spoke the final words, a subtle ripple passed through the air around the tower, the barrier strengthening, solidifying. The entities had been silent since Tower 19, pushed back more completely than ever before. But we knew they were still out there, still watching, still waiting for another opportunity, another weak point, another door. I thought often about the previous watchman, Daniel Weiss, trapped forever in the in-between. I wondered if he found some peace knowing his warnings had helped me succeed where he had failed. I hoped so. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Readings normal. Barrier intact. Well done. I texted back a simple acknowledgement, then returned to my duties. The new rules were more complex than the old ones, but also more logical, more purposeful. I understood now what I was doing and why, which made all the difference. As darkness fell completely, I performed the nighttime reinforcement ritual, watching with satisfaction as blue light briefly outlined the structure's edges, confirming the barrier's integrity. In the distance, at the very edge of my vision, I occasionally glimpsed tall, elongated figures among the trees. They never approached the tower, never tested the barrier. But they watched, always watching. Let them watch. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't empty, wasn't running, wasn't lost. I had found my purpose in the strangest of places, a fire lookout tower in Black Ridge National Forest, where I had faced horrors beyond imagination and emerged transformed. Tower 19 had taken everything from me, then given me something greater in return. The door was sealed. The rules had changed, and I was exactly where I needed to be.